All right, we will call this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. We would like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Mrs. Junk.
Here.
Mr. Lawler.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mrs. Witt.
Here.
Mr. Carey and Mr. Rivas are absent.
Okay, with 5 members present, we do have a quorum. We will move on to the consideration of moving something from consent to new business. Is there anything? So we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Motion carries 5-0. All right, so we'll move on to the board and superintendent salutes. The first salute the board will give, the schools today have done a great job of acknowledging and recognizing Veterans Day, so we just want to do the same as the board as well. Do we have any veterans here by chance? All right, lucky you. Can you rise and
Please stand.
Yeah, tell us.
I was an Air Force vet. I'm actually the president of the Sugar Grove Library Board too. But yeah, I'm an Air Force veteran, served active duty from 04 to 09, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you.
much for serving. And yeah, we appreciate all of our community members, stakeholders, employees, and lucky attendees of the board members as well. Thank you for your service. And then superintendent salute.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Mum, if you could join me and we'll recognize one of our students.
Okay, I didn't know if you had anything to say ahead of time. Last board meeting, you heard about our recognitions for our middle school students that took the Illinois Assessment for Readiness, the IAR. And this board meeting, we're recognizing our 3rd through 5th grade students that got a perfect score on the IAR. If you remember, the IAR used to be PARC, and then previous to that was ISAT and IGAP for our way older friends. So this was our very first year taking the IAR that we're reporting on. And in her first year taking it as a 3rd grader, she's a current 4th grader, Corinne Favor scored a perfect score on the ELA exam. So she has set the bar for herself very high, being the first time she ever took it. So congratulations to her. She is from John Shields Elementary.
Congratulations. That's terrific. You guys want to get here, turn around so mom and dad can get a picture? Come on in. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. The next thing is we recognize throughout the school year, I think it was Illinois Principals Association was Principal Appreciation at the last meeting. In the spring, we recognized our teachers for Teacher Appreciation. Tonight, we have the opportunity to recognize our school board members for School Board Appreciation through the IASB. So on behalf of our community, on behalf of our staff, students, and parents, we'd like to thank you for your service as a board member. So thank you.
Thank you.
When it comes to school board members, what I find interesting is that throughout the course of the school year, we have a number of board attendees, board meeting attendees, and they come at different times, so they experience different topics and see different topics. And I'm sure most of our community watches the videos at home and get to experience it fully. But those that don't, as I look back and I thought about what do board members do? Because I know they, first of all, they volunteer. Their service is free, and they give up a number of nights, like our teachers do, grading and coaching, and administrators serving at events. But as I look through it, I'd like to say thank you and salute you and share that one of the first things our board members do is, you just saw, they salute students, recognize students for their great work. They volunteer. This is a volunteer role. They work with, participate in, and decide or learn about the following topics: budgets, and this is over the course of the year, budgets, contracts, staffing, strategic planning, committees, handbooks, legal matters, calendars, audits, policies, SIP plans, capital projects. Are you guys tired yet? You're doing a lot. Public hearings, curriculum, school fees, school safety, tax levies, community engagement, donations, technology, professional development, state and federal legislation, policy updates, communication, solar power, as of recently, and again, our student recognition. It's, I'm sure you're probably tired now because that's a lot, but thank you for all of your work and thank you for your volunteering of your time. And as you see in front of you, enjoy your cookie, and thank you again on behalf of our parents, staff, and community. So thank you for your service. Thank you. Next, as we transition to people that give up their time and work hard, I would like Mr. Atkins, if you would join me for a second, please. Part of what makes our community great is the professional development that our board does. Our teachers continue on and they get additional professional development. They earn master's degrees and additional training. So in addition to that, administrators work towards a doctorate. So over the last couple weeks, Christopher Atkins has become Dr. Christopher Atkins. So congratulations for your work. Dr. Atkins started the process probably about 7.5 years ago.
Yeah, 7.5.
7.5 years ago, not by his doing, but by other people's doing. But congratulations, it was a doctorate in ed leadership from Northern. So again, congratulations, Dr. Atkins. So congratulations. I do have a certificate. Fortunately, I work very closely to a person who makes our certificates, and I work very closely across the hall from the person who has earned it, so I'll get the certificate tomorrow, and I can deliver it across the hallway. So thank you. Our last note for congratulations and salutes is our boys cross-country team. If you've not seen or heard, on Saturday, our boys cross-country team won the state championship in Class 2A, which is quite an accomplishment. If you've ever been down to the state track meet or have seen a state track meet, it's really an interesting event because it is at Detweiler Park. It is so spread out. It's very strategic how you get to move around and watch and cheer, as opposed to like softball or baseball or basketball, where you can kind of see it all in front of you. And so it's interesting watching it all unfold as they score, as they come across the finish line, because you don't know right away. Then you have to add the points. You have to wait. So congratulations to our students. They obviously won state, and as part of our fall recognitions, you'll be able to have the chance to meet them firsthand here on December 9th when we bring all of our athletics and activity students. And again, it's interesting to see it's awesome actually, not interesting, to see our community come together, because as part of their trip home, there was the parade down 47 to Harder to Maine, back through Elburn, and then out to the high school. So I chose the Purple Store to watch it because I could get a hot chocolate and a hot dog to watch the parade. So it's neat seeing the parade come by and all of the support as the different groups kind of hand off the team to the next community. So Sugar Grove started it, and then they handed it off to Caneville, and then Caneville handed it off to Elburn, and then Elburn finished up through Maple Park. So it's just neat to see the entire community celebrate our students, and we'll have the opportunity to do that in December when they come. So again, congratulations to our cross-country team.
All right, you guys are regulars here now, but you're more than welcome to, to sneak out if you would like. Congratulations again. And we will move on to public comments. Are there any public comments tonight? No? Yes? I have my spiel. Here it is. You can, as you're walking up, I'll tell you my spiel. Keep on going to the microphone. I don't know what I did with it for a second. So the board values public input to inform our decision-making and to provide information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. For that reason, the board does not enter into debate or respond to questions spontaneously or without proper investigation and deliberation. In most cases, concerns or questions requiring follow-up will be referred to the superintendent. If you choose to speak publicly, we ask that you stand, state your name and village of residence or your association with us for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less so that all who wish to speak may have that opportunity. You are encouraged to seek a private appointment to discuss matters concerning individual students or staff members. While public education can be an emotional issue, and understandably so, the board strives to maintain a certain level of decorum at the meeting. Those who speak are expected to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. The floor is now open to public comments. There you go.
Thank you. My name is Marie Gatz, and this is my husband David. We're from Elburn. We have 4 children in the Kaneland School District, and I'm just coming to, I think, have a voice from the community about the discussion from the last board meeting about curriculum at the high school and the course book offerings in regards to French, and some potential changes for foreign language offerings. I currently have a freshman in French, so I do understand from what I saw on the video that I watched that she will have the opportunity to move through French should she so choose, but any students who follow will not have that same opportunity. I guess one of my greatest concerns is that there is potentially going to be a change without knowing what is going to be added or exactly what is happening with the foreign language. They threw around German, Mandarin, but the one thing that was said was that perhaps going forward, students would only be able to take French 1 and French 2, which concerns me because are students really going to be choosing French or a foreign language other than Spanish, which they are greatly exposed to at the middle school and within the community. Obviously, I think numbers have increased because of that middle school exposure. I question and would love to know what is being done to encourage students to take other potential foreign language offerings. I think that keeping that open for our very global world today and having different offerings than just Spanish or just a French 1 and 2. I know that the high school requirement is only 2 years of Spanish, but should students want to go beyond, they need more. And I have children who are interested in taking French who are currently in 6th grade. So I'm just kind of here to voice that from the community. Anything to add?
I would just add that I think there are, by only offering 2 years of French for the next group of kids that comes up, we're not really making them college or career ready with the foreign language. If you take 2 years, freshman and sophomore year, you're not ready for a college level French. You're gonna have to start over again anyway. So it's really just checking a box if you're only offering a Spanish or a French 1 and a French 2. It doesn't seem like there's a real reason to offer that as an interim option. I would suggest that the board have a plan in place before implementing that kind of Spanish 1 or French 1, French 2 alternative in the short term. It doesn't sound like there's a plan in place yet to figure out what the future looks like.
Okay, I think that's
Yeah.
3 minutes, basically.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Nope. Okay, we will move on to the consent agenda. Tonight, the consent agenda contains the following action items: approval of treasurer report, October 2019, approval of minutes of the October 28, 2019 regular meeting, approval of resignations and employment of staff, approval of destruction of audio recordings from closed session meetings from April 2018, approval of school improvement plan, approval of Fox Valley Career Center fees for the use of Kaneland facilities, approval of disposal of vehicles at the Fox Valley Career Center, and the following informational item, the student suspension data report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Farber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
And Mrs. Junk.
Motion carries 7-0. So we'll move on to J1 2018-19 audit report for Fox Valley.
Yep, part of J1 and J2 are both the audit report, so I'll turn that over to Julianne, and I think she'll present our guest, Mr. Shaw.
Very good. First of all, thank you very much for being here tonight. Mr. Shaw is actually our field auditor. In the past, we've had Mr. Barron, who works back in the office, but Mr. Shaw actually does the work on our audit and on our records, and then Mr. Barron actually checks that work. So I'm glad to have Mr. Shaw here tonight to present both the Fox Valley and the Kaneland audit. The purpose of tonight is for the board to receive the audit reports, ask any questions that you might have, And then between now and the next board meeting, you'll have more time to review hard copies. You've had a short time to review the electronic copy. And at the next board meeting, I will put the approval of the reports on the consent agenda. Unless if I have any questions from any board members, then we'll put it on new business for discussion. But otherwise, I'm thankful. The process is almost concluded. It's always a push at the end to get it done. So thank you for being here, and you can start with Fox Valley and then Kaneland.
If I borrow your table real quick.
Not at all.
All right, thank you for having me. I first would like to thank Julianne and Judy and the entire finance staff for all their hard work in making this a successful audit year. Without their help, this wouldn't be possible, so thank you. I'm first going to go through the Fox Valley Career Center with you. And if you turn to page 1, you'll find our Lauterbach name and letterhead. This is our independent audit report in which we gave a clean, unmodified opinion. It's the highest opinion you may receive, and it states that the financial statements were presented fairly. If you skip a couple more pages, you'll find the management discussion and analysis. This provides a summary of how the year performed in narrative form. So if you have questions on fluctuations from year to year or what the numbers truly mean, this would be where you would want to find your answers. The financial statements themselves begin on page 10. The financial statements start with the statement of net position. This is essentially the balance sheet for the Career Center in full accrual, which means your long-term assets, such as capital assets, and your long-term liabilities, such as the net pension liability, are reported here. The financial statements you're more accustomed to seeing start on page 13. It starts off with the individual general fund balance sheet, and your income statement is on page 15. On page 15 at the bottom, you'll see that the ending fund balance was at $252,000. The notes to the financial statement begin on page 18. The notes of the financial statement provide further detail into how we came up with the numbers that we did with supporting schedules. Within here, you'll find capital asset schedules and long-term debt. Lastly, if you jump all the way to page 38, page 38 is the start of your budgetary information. So if you want to see how the fund performed based on what it was budgeted for, this would be where you would go. Does anyone have any questions on the Fox Valley before I jump into the school district? No? Okay, I'll jump right into the school district then as well, which is the much thicker packet that you received. If you jump to page 9, page 9 is the Certificate of Excellence Award that was awarded to you for last year's audit. We have applied for and expect to receive the same award for 2019. So congratulations on receiving this award. If you skip about 3 more pages, the independent audit report is on page 10. We did provide a unmodified, clean opinion on the school district as well. The financial statements themselves begin on page 24. Again, it starts off with the statement of net position, which is also in full accrual. And if you turn one more page, on page 26 is what's called the statement of activities. This is essentially your income statement for the school district as a whole, also in full accrual. If you jump to page 29, towards the bottom of page 29, you'll see the general fund had a net increase of $3 million. So now you're at an ending fund balance of $6.4 million. And the general fund is made up of your education, operations and maintenance, land cash, and working cash. The notes to the financial statement start on page 35. And I'm not going to go through the notes with you tonight. I want to keep on your good side. So if you jump all the way to page 96, page 96 is your individual fund budgetary information again. The only additional item that we have for the school district compared to the Fox Valley is on page 127. This is the start of statistical information, so if you want to see comparison reports from prior years, this would be where you would go to look for those. Included would be fund balance comparisons and tax levy comparison reports. Does anyone have any questions on the financial report itself? Sorry, I know I threw a lot at you real quick, so.
Questions? We good? So, good?
We did have one current year recommendation for the implementation of GASB 84, which will be implemented next year. It's a change in how we're going to be reporting the student activity funds. There's still not a definitive answer on how exactly it's going to work, but it will not change the day-to-day activities. And finally, the last report that we provided is the single audit report. Since the school district received over $750,000 of federal funding, a separate report and audit was required. And it's more compliance related. Does anyone have any questions?
And your GASB comment was the management letter, right? That was this one?
Yes, yeah. And there is a second comment
The
for
budget
prior
one?
year,
Okay,
but that was implemented this year, so next year that will go away.
go away. Perfect.
Any other questions?
How did you get this to Julianne?
Really well,
That's
yeah,
what I thought.
very well.
Is
Yeah.
that due in
Yes.
October or something?
It is due in October. There were a few delays, but it was on our end, not theirs.
And we did file extensions. Extensions are pretty common in school districts, so we did file, it's either a 30 or 60-day extension.
We had a little hard time getting some of our data tables from our research company, so just took a little extra time.
Yeah. But overall, this was a very successful year.
Yeah,
And I think when,
unlike last year. Yeah.
Last year
With
was
this.
successful too.
It was, but we had that state problem last year. It's outside of our control.
Yeah,
So-
that caused further delays.
So at least we didn't have that,
Yep.
which is good.
my point being, I believe we selected this organization because they usually on time.
Yes,
Just want to
Yeah.
compliment you.
Yes, thank you.
they worked hard to get it to us.
Great.
Got one more year on this contract.
Julianne, I just wanted to, or Dr. Fuchs, thank you to you in the business office for all of your work. And then Mr. Shaw, please take back to your colleagues our appreciation for the punctuality to have this done and on time for our district. So thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks. You want me to keep those or are those yours?
These are my copies.
Perfect.
All right, so we'll move on to J3, discussion of approval of high school course book.
Yep, if you recall, this is at a minimum, a 2-board meeting presentation where it's initially brought to the board and then in the second meeting, based on the conversation, could come back in consent or on new business. So based on some of the questions that the board members had, for this one, Mr. Raleigh has a few updates and some information he's going to provide, so then we'll be able to take action, or at least a recommendation to take action tonight after the presentation. So Mr. Raleigh.
Thank you. Good evening. I In looking back at last month's already board meeting, typically, as Dr. Layden had said, we would revisit this meeting looking to put it in the consent agenda. But there was a couple items on here, particularly our French offerings and the AP Physics 1 prerequisite that I wanted to revisit just to make sure that all questions were answered. And I wanted to take the first beginning part of this just to clarify some things from my end, some statements we made that weren't entirely accurate, so I wanted to clear those up. We had talked about, and I think intertwining the number of students that had taken the AP French class with the number of students that had taken the AP French exam. And I misspoke in saying that number has gone down. The number of students that had taken that the course has gone down, but the number of students that have taken the AP test itself has increased. In this past year was the first year that we had students that take it, so it increased 200%. It went up to 2 kids taking that. There were a couple questions on students who had previously taken Spanish that were now in French class. And I don't know if we gave an accurate number, but that is the hard data is that 15 students are currently in French who had previously taken Spanish, and we have 7 native Spanish speakers that are taking a French class.
So when you say 15, was that middle school or just any time?
That would have been that's a good question. I'm not sure. It was pulled from our high school French course. So our high school French teacher pulled his students in his classes.
Okay.
The other thing that I wanted to clarify, because I know we get used to our office working with our building admin and staff, we get used to certain terminology. When we talk about just moving forward, there is a curriculum committee at the high school that looks at the course book every single year. Independently from that, Ed Services does a curriculum review with different departments. It comes out to about every 6 or 7 years. The Ed Service curricular review for foreign language finished up last year, so that's not on the books again for a few more years. What I want to clarify tonight and make sure that there are no outstanding questions as we move forward with French. I worked with the department chair, Michelle, from the high school, of how many languages, we started to look there, how many languages do we want to offer? She pulled some great data from our comparable districts, from some surrounding districts, and typically high schools that offer one language see an enrollment of about 600 to 700 kids. High schools that offer 3 languages, I think the average tended to be about 2,300 students that were enrolled. Right where we're at, we offer 2 languages, and typically high schools that offer 2 foreign languages are about 1,300, 1,350 students. So we figured that is what is best for us moving forward. We want to be able to offer 2 languages. With French, we want to make sure that French is the most appropriate language, and right now, I can't definitively tell you, yes, it is. There's a few different foreign languages that can benefit our students moving forward, but I want to take some time over the course of the rest of this year, and that would trickle into the high school curriculum committee making some recommendations or coming back and providing you with some data that we find in the spring. So tonight, what I wanted to clarify, we want to align our French course to all of our other course offerings. And when I say course offerings, that goes in the course handbook, and students have the option to sign up for those. Whether or not that class runs, meaning students are enrolled, it's on their schedule, and they are in that class on a daily basis, for all courses is dependent upon student enrollment. And that's fairly unique in talking with high school administration to our district, that sometimes they run whatsoever, but our offerings are driven entirely on students signing up for those classes. Historically, French has not done that. So the first thing I wanted to articulate is we are going to align that to make sure that our French offerings are dependent upon students signing up for those courses. The other thing we want to do is make sure that we have a timeline for figuring out what is the best language for our student population. And in order to do so with that, last time I shared with you that we were going to investigate, and I didn't have some concrete dates for you. And maybe, Sarah, can you click through? There we go. Of looking at these. And right now, our course handbook would look as is compared to this year. Students would be able to sign up for all 4 levels of French. French 1 and French 2 would be communicated to our class of 2024, so our current 8th graders. They start to sign up in December for their classes. So we would communicate to them that they would have an option of 2 years of French, with the caveat that that is pending an interest survey and interest review of our students to see what is the most appropriate language to offer. We are in agreement or talking with our foreign language department and talking with administration that we would like our students to be able to have an option for 2 different foreign languages. The reason that we put a 2-year plan on there is that most colleges look for 2 years of foreign language at their universities. So what this does is if I'm an 8th grader now and I want to sign up for French, we are guaranteeing them that they can get through those 2 years and it would meet what that minimum requirement for most universities. We're not going to change it on them. We don't have the time to do that. So they're not going to sign up for French 1 next year, and then the following year that is eliminated and it is a different language. So regardless of what that survey finds and what the interest of our district is, if I'm an 8th grader right now and I sign up for French for next year, I am allowed and I'm guaranteed I can get through those first 2 years. The timeline moving forward for this, we want to make sure that we get input from parents and students. The Citizens Advisory Committee is meeting this Thursday, and the course handbook is on part of that agenda. I will be there to solicit some feedback from parents as far as what those foreign language offerings should be. And then we are going to put out a survey in the following month. So registration for our 8th graders, our class of 2024, starts in December. The rest of the high school is done in January, and then our administration will work on which courses run based on student selection. So once that's done, we will conduct a survey with our current 8th graders and our high school students to see what is that interest for that second language. Going back, some of the implications we looked at, again, the course handbook would be as is currently, and that would provide us the time to do this work to make sure when we come to you and we say, it is French, after looking at all of this, the interest is French, or if it's something different, we would have that time frame to figure out how we need to staff that, what materials we need, and we want to be able to come with factual data for you on what that second language should be. So this would allow for that time. Students can sign up. They would be allowed French 1 and French 2 with a caveat that depending on what that survey says, it could be French, so that French 3 and French 4 could be there. If it is a different language, we would have time built in there over the next couple of years to figure out how we need to staff that. Finding teachers for a Mandarin or a German can be very difficult. Finding materials to provide for kids, writing the curriculum maps. So we need that timeline to be able to work through those pieces.
So if you decide it is French going forward, are you back to, I guess, which is the bigger priority, offering 2 4-year paths or offering the same class priority, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it, that you offer Calc 3, that you offer French 4, that you kind of, which one that you're going to not run a class with lower class size, or you know what I mean? You're going to guarantee the 4-year 2 languages. Does that question make sense? I don't know if I said it well.
It
But those
does.
are kind of conflicting each other, so which one trumps the other?
So there's, in that work that curriculum committee would do, there's some options there, and some districts would combine a 3 and a 4 into a class. There's some things that the curriculum committee can look into to providing. I would say all of that would be dependent on numbers that enroll. It would be hard for me to stand in front of you and say if we have numbers of 3, 4, 5 students that we would run an entire course for that. So I think all of this is under the caveat that it's going to be dependent upon students registering for those classes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
What is the magic number of students?
That one we don't necessarily have for some of the core content classes. It's French. I don't have a number for you. I don't know what. I think that would be working with the building administration, looking at what those are. We don't have a concrete number written down that says it has to be this number in order to run it.
What is it, like, maybe you're asking too, like what the decision criteria is? Because I think some upper level math classes, do they sometimes take them at Wabansie or some other?
Yes, they have.
So does the decision criteria ever consider if there is another path to get, to fulfill that student need? Does that come into play, or I don't know, like, or is it a certain number? If it's 5, then that's too low?
What is the criteria then that you use to determine?
Is that what you're kind of asking?
Yeah.
Just, or other examples of classes that don't run because they're just too small, is that usually a single digit number?
I would be comfortable saying probably a single digit. The numbers, there's been one class I know that has gone into the single digits that has run, and that has been a yearbook class, and that was just because that class is putting out the product of the yearbook. So that one had in the years past dipped into a single digit, and that one has still run. I don't know if there's courses that have run with a single digit or even 10 or 11 outside of our French classes. I can get that information for you. I can work with Jill and Carrie at the high school to provide that information. But there isn't one where we say it has to meet this threshold in order for it to run.
So I still didn't hear what the criteria is then to determine whether or not you run a class.
I would need to get back to you. I don't have a good answer for you right now. It depends on, again, the mandated classes versus elective classes. But I can get a better answer for you, but I don't have that for you.
Fair enough.
Yep.
So I have a concern. I think it's probably true that state universities require only 2 years.
Yep.
Liberal arts colleges and highly competitive colleges and universities ask for 3 or 4 years. So my concern would be that somebody would start with French, because usually a freshman doesn't know exactly where they're going to go to school, and then just when they're at that threshold of choosing their college, they're going into their junior year, and all of a sudden there aren't enough students to give them the 3rd year of French. I mean, I guess they could go and do, switch to Spanish and do 2 years there.
Yep.
But I know they can't.
Usually it has to be concurrent. If they require 3 years, I think usually it's the same program.
Same one.
Nice try.
Because I know all three of my kids had to have 4 years. And they were liberal arts colleges. I mean,
Okay.
and I know that's different, but we do have a lot of kids that go to Augustana and, Monmouth and and Knox and places like that are right here.
Yep.
And I would be concerned about that. Just how we would identify, and meet the needs of those kids. And, I would hate to be the one to tell them, we don't have enough kids to run this class, and now you're not going to meet the requirements to get into your
Just go
top,
where you want to go to.
your top choices
Yep.
of school.
So what do you do if there's 3 kids that want to take French 3? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. In your situation, do we think we need to guarantee that spot so we always have a second 4-year track, or is there another way for them to get credit? I don't know.
So last meeting, Patrick had said that there might be other modalities, right?
There are, yep.
We don't know for sure, but there could be other
Yep,
options, right?
there are other options, and again, I don't want to speak on behalf of that committee, but those are, I feel like this timeline moving forward would allow us the time to investigate those things. An immediate answer that would jump to mind would be that there are some online universities that the high school accepts those credits. There's some things we would need to work for because there is a fee that's associated with those. So those are some things we would need to flush out. There is an option of, even if they're lower classes, if French 3 or whatever that language is of a 3 and a 4 are lower, we can combine those classes. Some districts, Michelle has done a good job finding some research on a lot of districts around us that we're not in isolation, that our numbers are so drastically low compared to a lot of other high schools. It's typical for the high schools that offer 2 languages. Spanish is about what we have, and then their second language seems to be lower compared to what the Spanish offerings are. And some of those high schools will combine that 3 and a 4 in order to get that to run. So there are options there for the students that are interested in a 3rd and a 4th year. And it might be that so many kids want to take it that we continue to offer the 3 and the 4 for them. So I'm not comfortable tonight saying this is what we would do. I would ask for that time to continue to gauge the district, gauge the students that want to take those, and then work with that curriculum committee on how to best serve those students.
When you survey the kids, is it possible that you can also inform them of this, right? Like, so, you know, here are some options, here are other languages, but then also if we go to a smaller language, it may only offer 2. It might not offer all 4. I mean, could that be part of that survey as well, so that we're informing as well as soliciting information?
Yep, and we've talked about some of the information that would need to go in there to make sure students are making as informed of a decision as possible, where it's not just this language sounds really neat or sounds interesting and they don't know everything that would entail. We want to make sure that we are providing some background knowledge for kids. We're asking 8th graders to make some decisions as they move in. We want to make sure that they're as well informed. That's why I think it's important to talk to parents about this as well, and bring that up to starting with our CAC to make sure that we are as informed as possible. And in looking back on our last meeting, I wasn't comfortable doing that without revisiting it tonight. Sure. So I want to make sure we can collect that.
So I think I'm hearing something, but I'm not sure. Are we deciding what languages we're going to offer based on a survey of the students? Is that what you're saying, or am I hearing something?
And the CAC.
That's one piece.
Yes, I would like to see if French is the language moving forward. Does that make sense?
Based on surveying the students, not most popular spoken languages or whatever. I mean, there's a bunch of different criteria.
There's a lot of different criteria for different languages. There's a huge push for French. Most of all the districts around us, it's French and Spanish. There's, depending on what you read, there's a strong push for German with some STEM stuff, or for some STEM options. I don't think we have the trend data to say that the majority of our students are going into the STEM field, so we want to make sure that language is German. Or the majority of our students are going into this field, so we want to, that's the purpose of that survey, is to see what are the students interested in and what language do they want to learn moving forward.
I think part of the question was just CAC on Thursday night and a student survey, or are there other things that are going to be taken into consideration to make the final decision?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's. So is there going to be departmental research? What other pieces in addition to CAC?
Yep,
and
and
a
I
student
have
survey?
some of that research that I can, Michelle has gotten some of that, and I have some of that information that I can provide for you.
And that'll be all part of the spring report?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So it might include something like, you know, colleges and universities and what they consider to be the, you know, when they look at a school and they think, oh, they have a, you know, a healthy, full and complete, you know, foreign language department, what would they expect to see? And, you know, I would, rather than just, hey, what languages do you want to learn, kids? You know, that, and I know that's not what you're saying, but, and I.
Are you wondering then, should a should a high school counselor, when doing 8th grade registration, because I think when I've sat in freshman orientation, I've heard, you know, graduation requirements, college acceptance sort of paths. I mean, do you think they should specifically be directed to a guaranteed language that has 4 years? Is that what you're
Okay,
asking?
What I have found.
I think it's not realistic to expect an incoming 9th grader to know what college, you know, so we either need to be really jumping on that bandwagon and saying, you need to start thinking about this much earlier. And, you know, and we've started that trend, I know, at the middle school. Started, you know, like what kind of college you want to go to, what kinds of things you want to study, so that they don't get stuck. But if you say there's different, you know, delivery models, you know, that can also be, I also know that as a parent of somebody who had to take some things with a different delivery model, we were stuck paying Wabansi fees, and they were exorbitant. We were stuck transporting him 3 days a week to the Wabansi classes and back. So he was going from home, from Sugar Grove to the high school, Sugar Grove to the high school, Sugar Grove 4 times a day, you know, on those 3 days. So that can be kind of difficult for a family and for parents. And then the other thing, you know, and I know, I trust that you guys will look into all this stuff, you know, the Romantic languages and the Germanic language, perhaps it's good to have one of each. And if, German is something that is preferable for STEM students, and I would trust that our counselors then, when they see a student whose interest is, STEM related, that they would say, perhaps you should take German and not.
From what I could find as far as is there a preferred language of universities, I didn't find a common trend saying yes or no. What they were looking for, and we kind of mentioned it before, was consistency within that language. So whether it is a Spanish or a French or a German, they want to look at years in that same language. So the depth that they go into that language, not necessarily what that language is. But I will continue to investigate that and bring that back for you.
I do like this idea though of surveying, because ultimately registration is the decision by the student, and they kind of choose which classes are going to run and which ones don't. So maybe trying to get ahead of that would be a good thing, right? So we kind of going to preview what the registration might look like if you survey beforehand. So I think that's a good way to go about it.
Appreciate that.
Couple questions.
Yep.
How many students do we have in French this year and going back to next year? What's the average if numbers?
I would say low 20s for 1 and 2, and I think 3 and 4 are 12 and 11, 12 and 10 right now, respectively.
So it's pretty significant.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is, history-wise, what is spearheading us to potentially looking at changing this?
I believe that the questions arose in the past from it being a lower enrollment, and why were we running a class with lower enrollment?
Okay. Last time you mentioned, and you kind of touched on it earlier, that French was a class that, or French, the subject matter, was, or class, was a preferred language from your surveying, from, I forget, I know you've done some research on it.
Yep.
So I'm puzzled, actually. I'm puzzled.
You're puzzled by?
Also,
By the potential change we're trying to make. If, I know Spanish is strong, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And in my words, but you had mentioned from your research for last time that French was strong.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm puzzled. I get that potentially we may want to look at another language. As I said, I challenge you guys to have 3, but I just heard your numbers of the 2,300, 1,300 is what we have, and I get that number as well. But it just leaves me puzzled. It just leaves me puzzled.
And I don't know if this is where you're coming from, but with the popularity of French around the world, are you thinking that in my mind, then our number should be a little bit higher in that area?
No. The numbers are as they are, as the request of the children or the interest of the
Yep.
children. I was just, the reason for just kind of piggybacking on the comment that stuck with me last time was that you said was French was a preferred language. I guess, along with Spanish, I guess, in that case.
I think he had said some studies indicated that French was most popular, but some studies indicated that it wasn't.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So I heard the other one. The other one stuck to me. So anyway, hence the question of where we were
Why are
last year, this year.
moving away from it?
And I get it that French is not as preferred, I guess, from a student standpoint, or strong, if you will, from those that takes the Spanish class. And yet at the same time, as I mentioned last time, could it be if the French numbers were low, and I don't know what average-wise where they've been in the last 5, 10 years, whatever. But obviously, what was it, 2, 3 years ago that we added Spanish even in middle school? And at the time, if did it influence, and my question was last time was, did it influence potentially that they're taking Spanish at the middle schools, and obviously, oh yeah, now it's easier for me, so therefore I'm going to go this route, as opposed to the French side.
But to me, the numbers you throw at me, I don't know what is that would you say that's a good number to have, or is too low, too high? I'm obviously not too high, but I mean, too low. You mentioned about the other districts. How do we compare with them as far as their numbers?
I can provide that for you. I don't want to speak to exact numbers,
Sure.
but as far as those that offer a second language, it's pretty comparable. And then I don't know exactly how they break down 1, 2, 3, and 4, but it's fairly comparable of the number of students that take a second language is a bit lower than those that are taking Spanish. Every district around us provides Spanish. Most all provide Spanish and French. Some do Spanish and German. So that second language apart from Spanish seem to be in all districts, most all districts, and I can provide the hard numbers for you, to be at about the total population where we're at right now, or the total enrollment of where we're at with our French.
Is there any thought about having French taught at the middle school?
We have, I have not, I've talked with Michelle a little bit about that and kind of running it parallel to what our Spanish class has been. I have not been part of those in the past, but something certainly that we can revisit.
The reason I'm asking that is if we're giving Spanish or teaching Spanish here at the middle school, but not French, those students have they have a reason to continue with Spanish in the high school. Well, you're not doing the same thing for someone that's interested in French. They have to wait until they get to high school. So is there any thought of offering French also in the middle school?
I believe it's been looked into in the past. I'm not sure exactly the reason why it hasn't been, but I'd be happy to update that, update you on that.
I mean, it just kind of seems that that's part of the reason that the French classes are not as, enrollment's not as high in high school.
That was my analysis, just looking at it that way.
But you might find through the survey that it's not French, but it's Mandarin that people want, right? So this whole thing is kind of
It's gonna go in the air.
too early to make any of those kinds of choices, to get some of that data right to work from, I would think, right?
Yep, for sure.
So, is it correct that none of this is going to impact the course book? It's just the delivery of communication counseling to the 8th graders? Is that sort of the end
Correct. The
result of
course book would
conversation?
still have French 1 through 4 as the offerings.
So I think our discussion.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
With the caveat that you might not run 3 and 4 if.
But that's the caveat of every class in our course
I thought
book.
that was new tonight.
We would align French to those other classes, that if the enrollment is not there, then it wouldn't run.
I don't know if that's a caveat, it's a caveat to every class in the
But that
course
would
book
be,
to some extent. So
that's the standard we have for every other
To
course.
some extent. This would be a direct communication. I think that some of it's procedural, is that the message that we want delivered to the 8th graders, I think, is part of the conversation.
And that would be, that course booklet, we would look at that for probably the next 2 years while we, depending on what happens, and if we need to make changes, we would need that time in order to look at what the potential FTE would be, materials, if it's a completely different language that we decide to go with, what the materials would be, who would be teaching that. There's some things, some unknowns that I don't have for you tonight, depending on what we decide. So our French offerings would stay the same for at least the next 2 years.
I'm frustrated.
Okay.
I've been harping on this for years, literally. And you tell me you went through a curriculum review of this whole process last year, didn't decide to make any changes last year. Now, after I harp about it some more, we're reviewing it, and you're telling me we're 2 years away from doing anything?
It's just the natural timeline we would need. If we were to introduce a brand-new language, if let's say that was Mandarin, that we wanted to have a Mandarin teacher instruct our students in our class, that is an incredibly difficult teacher to find that can teach those classes. Then we would need to thoroughly vet the materials that we would use, because we don't have those on hand right now. We would need to write the progressions of the curriculum map, and we don't have that right now. So we would need time in order to do those things, get them into the course book, have students sign up for it. So it's just kind of the natural progression we would need in order to introduce a brand new class.
So last year they did a curriculum, I can never get that word out. Review.
Yep.
And decided we should keep teaching French. So now we're going to review French, and 6 months from now, or 5 months, you're going to make recommendations as to if we keep teaching French, if we give French 3 and 4, or if we switch to another language. Depending on what your surveys and focus groups and whatnot tell us. Is that correct?
That's correct from my point. I can't speak to, I was not part of what that curricular review process looked like in the past, so I'm not sure what conversations were had as far as offerings.
I guess I don't understand why this didn't come up during that review cycle.
Dr. Mum?
Dr. Mum.
I was there, Mr. Rice obviously oversaw that portion of it, but I was part of it for the exploratory part. At that time, it's different, and I think Mr. Rowley said it kind of at the beginning. During that review cycle that happened 2 years ago, the task we were to look at was to review our units of study, review our materials, review our textbook, and ask for adoption of resources and new curriculum maps, not the structures of language.
Okay,
that
that's
didn't
where
occur.
I guess I'm getting lost.
For sure.
So when, as a administration or a board or whatever group says, hey, we want to teach Mandarin,
Yep.
where does that get introduced into the whole process?
That doesn't go necessarily through the curriculum review cycle until it's an adopted on-the-books course. The review cycles look at adopted courses for editing and resources. What Patrick had mentioned at the beginning, that goes to that course handbook high school group that looks at the adoption of new courses, what our availabilities are, and that's the work that they're proposing to do now for that.
So I'm confusing it.
Why that didn't happen 2 years ago, it is a valid question. We just looked at the revamp of the curriculum at the time, on-books curriculum, and the courses within the high school of that separate course booklet committee did not look at different languages to be offered at the time. To my knowledge, Mr. Rice might have more.
And that's fine. I guess
Yeah.
I was getting confused as to
Yep.
exactly how the process works.
Yep.
So, all right, thank you.
So could it also happen then, if you choose during the review, if you decide to go with a different language than French, we may have to run 3 concurrent languages in order to complete, the kids that came in and were told the French would be
Yep.
available. We
Yep.
may be running 3 languages until we phase out.
Yep. We
French.
talked a little bit about that last meeting, that there would likely be a need for that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so tonight, the only thing that we're actually doing is making that one little note changes that may or may not be 3 or 4, or maybe be combined, and then giving you guys time to come back and tell us what you learned.
Yep, I think the note change would be that we want to align that with all of our other courses, that it's dependent upon students enrolling in that class. And that, yes, we would, just to outline that timeline a little bit more of what we would be doing in the winter and then through the spring semester.
Okay, thank you.
The last piece that was on there, and I just wanted to clarify, was that the AP French 1 prerequisite change. A piece that I feel got lost in there a little bit was changing that caveat from showing high levels of success to making sure we have that concrete, the B- average or greater in previous math and science classes. So there was some questions that came up with that. So I just wanted to make sure that that was highlighted, that we're looking to change that the subjective high level success to something that's a little bit more tangible with grades. And with that, that is, I move to recommending that we approve the course handbook, if there's no other questions.
I still challenge you guys to put 3 classes, or 3 languages.
What?
I still
challenging the board.
get 3 languages.
All right, so is there any conversation about physics? No.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
So you have to take regular physics before you take AP physics? It says prerequisites were Algebra 2 and Physics. And
Yes.
Physics full year, so you have to take Physics and AP Physics?
Or Algebra 2 and then a B- in your math or science classes, so not necessarily.
Okay.
Some students take 3 full years to get the 2 AP years
Okay.
currently, or they could.
Okay. It just seems to me that you kind of choose either AP or regular and everything else, and you don't usually double them up. But I get it.
So the French piece, I think I know Gail, you pointed out you're a little confused about a little bit of the motions. I don't know if people know what they want, and then we make sure the motion is what they want it to be. Is there a consensus as to where we want to land? Mike?
So the note had said that we're also going to make French 1 and 2 based on enrollment.
Excuse me, could you say that again?
The note on the screen said we're also going to do French 1 and 2 as based on enrollment.
As a course, all of our courses are based on enrollment.
But that hasn't been traditionally true if you're offering French 1 and 2.
It has not been. French has run regardless of what the enrollment numbers were.
And I think if I understand what your point you're making, you're saying that you're going to definitely offer 1 and 2.
Yep.
And you can't put that caveat with it for French 1 and 2 and put it in the course book.
It would go in the course booklet as an offering, so students would have the opportunity to do that. If it comes back that only 2 or 3 kids want to take French 1, then we wouldn't run it. All of our...
And that's where I'm getting stuck.
Okay.
On that, because, and until you, meaning the administration,
Yep.
comes up with a second language, I want 2 offered. I don't want it to be, if there's enough kids, we need.
I would be okay with 3 and 4 being based on enrollment, but I don't, like, you sign up for French 1, that's what you're gonna go with, but French 2, only 2, like, you have to start over because you can't even get your 2 basic years. I mean, I've worked in colleges for over a decade, so I know that there's tons of ways. It's not just that you have to have 4 years in college. Some of them make you test out anyway.
Right.
But the 2 years is pretty standard. So I feel like if we're gonna offer 1 and 2, we need to offer 1 and 2.
Yeah. You still get tested even if you take 4 years of it.
Right. I took 4 years of Spanish and still had to test out.
Right,
I had to
exactly.
take 2 more classes. So like,
Right.
you can take 4 years and still not make it work.
Right.
And I guess my other thought would be is if someone comes in as a freshman and they take French 1 and then the next 2 years there's not enough kids for French 2 and you finally have it as a senior, they're not gonna remember what they learned as a freshman. So I guess until you come back in the spring and tell us something different, I can't agree to not at least offering 1 and 2.
I almost think it's easier to do the enrollment question with French 1, because you could at least steer kids to Spanish 1, you know.
Rephrase for me.
So it's not as damaging or impactful to a student if they're coming in as a freshman and they say, I want to take French 1. And you say, oh, there were only 3 people who enrolled, so now, you know, we'd like you to move and take Spanish 1. And they, you know, at that point, they haven't taken anything, it's okay. But if they take French 1 and then they come back sophomore year and 2 isn't offered, then I think that there's a more impactful problem. So I guess, yeah.
Any other?
So you're basically saying offer 1 and 2? Is that what is that your in favor?
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, depending on enrollment.
And then see what we learn in the spring.
We can certainly make that change to the course book, yep.
Aaron, you seem to be thinking.
Which is kind of what,
Yeah.
She says to make sure that's reflected in the motion.
yeah, that's
because
basically what that's.
What do you do with other classes? Because there are classes you offer, correct, that don't run, right? That have been on the books and just never run.
Correct.
Right, so, and they don't run because there's no enrollment for them, or there's a low enrollment.
Low enrollment, correct.
Okay. So now we're saying that we're going to make an exception for French 2 or French 1 and 2, which we're kind of already doing anyways, right? I'm torn about that because, like, now we're saying that these 2 classes are still like kind of special classes as opposed to everybody else's classes, which we're not doing that for. I don't know if I have an answer to that.
I think aren't they usually high-level classes, though, that don't run?
Elective classes?
Yeah.
It could be anything. I don't know the past trends of ones that have not run, but it could
Because,
be.
like, upper-level calculus classes often don't run.
Right. But then there are like low-level art classes, I'm sure that don't run.
Yep.
There were,
Right.
at one year, we had art, I think there was a fourth year of art that we didn't run, and we ended up combining it with the third year, I think.
But art also isn't like you have to have 2 consecutive years of art.
Correct.
To apply to college.
Right.
But some
Unless
colleges
you're
will
an
take it
artist.
instead of a foreign language.
Yeah, but
Yep.
not that you could have done a year of music and a year of Spanish,
Right.
and it would still meet the requirement. But the language is very specific. Almost all of them are at minimum 2 consecutive years.
Sure.
Right.
And I said, I don't disagree with what
Yeah.
you guys are saying, I'm torn on it because I think we're favoring those 2 classes. And I never liked that idea because now we're telling students,
Right.
don't take choir, don't take art, take these 2 years of French because they're
Yeah.
favorite class, they're special classes.
But I
And I
think-
don't know if it's true, I'm just saying I worry about that.
I think at least in the short term, the odds of that being important are probably moot, because they have the numbers.
Right,
So it seems like we're focused more on
that's a good point.
3 and 4.
Historically, the numbers have been there for 1 and 2 to run those. They're typically in a mid to low 20s.
Yeah, that's what it said.
Yep.
Yeah, so this might be a moot point, yeah, which is fair.
So we're concerned about 3 and 4? Do we need to know the plan to do 3 and 4, or are we fine saying that's a
We're gonna get
vote
one
with your
in the
feet?
spring, right?
Bring that back in the spring.
Yeah.
So the only change right now is making 3 and 4, basically, we're making 3 and 4 dependent on numbers, which is the same.
Well, we're continuing to 3 and 4 for those that are currently in French.
Correct,
But for anybody coming into it,
correct.
that's not there.
Until spring, and then we'll make an educated decision as to what to do.
I thought there was a change to that. I know that's what we discussed last time. There's a change to that. That it's no longer phasing out 3 and 4, but now it's by numbers.
Yeah.
I just wanna clarify that.
Unless you're concerned telling 8th graders that eliminating 3 and 4 will make you not have numbers for 1 and 2, you know? You'll sort of sabotage your...
I think, in my mind, we're making a temporary decision until we get the information in the spring. So all I see is we're doing is adding the caveat that we're gonna run 3 and 4 3 years from now based on numbers. I'm fine with that.
I'm good. You're good.
Is that what the motion says?
Yeah, that's
Probably not.
fix it now.
I guess I kind of
That wasn't a discussion
I
last
kind
time.
of feel like I want to
agree
make
with you.
just one comment that I don't think that we have a higher enrollment in Spanish just because we offer it in middle school and it's, you know, and things like that. We have people in our community that speak Spanish. It's more useful to students and adults, you know, in the area and in the country than French is. So I think you're always going to have higher Spanish enrollment for that reason. I just, you know,
Here's
sometimes.
one right here.
So I wouldn't necessarily think we should, you know, change and offer French at the middle school because we think that it might boost enrollment a little bit, but I don't know that it'll ever catch up to.
I think that would be true with any language we decide to offer. If
That
it's
is true.
German and we
Yep.
push it into the junior high, you're gonna see increased numbers in the high school. It's not French dependent, it's the language and where it's offered dependent.
Right.
Sure.
Although I would be curious about Mandarin.
Well, hopefully we learn in the spring.
Yeah.
You will.
Me too.
I mean, just from my basic research, there are schools that you have to have done one of these 5 languages, and Mandarin is not on any of those lists. I would not recommend that Mandarin be our second language. It's not a wise decision for our students.
It would be incredibly hard to staff.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sure
Besides that.
finding someone certified in Mandarin.
Yep.
I'm sure they're out there. We got plenty of colleges.
Yes.
I'm sure
So
they're
how
out
do we
there.
make this motion work?
Draft it up, what you want. I'm fine as it is.
Unless we're just saying, because we're in agreement with the AP physics.
I mean, I guess I'm still a little confused that besides the physics piece, that there really is a change to the course book.
Right.
Well,
The
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think the course I think the course book would stay the same. It's the practice of what we're going to do this registration season leading up to the spring.
Correct.
Is that what you?
Correct, yep,
Okay.
the course book is the same.
So
Yep.
do you,
But it's not if you're putting 3 and 4 based on numbers in the course.
That's not listed in the course book for any of our courses. That's just,
It's matching the practice.
it's, yep.
Oh, so that was an unwritten rule before, that we always gave 4 years?
That has run, yep, regardless of
numbers.
numbers enrolled.
so.
Is the motion as is, right?
As is.
Yeah.
So the motion, we really don't need, we're saying we don't need, I'm just looking at the minutes. The minutes probably need to be adjusted, the proposed minutes, but the motion is still just the last piece to approve the course handbook as presented. Is that what everyone's saying? Go ahead.
No, I guess I'm not, because if some kid reading the course handbook isn't gonna know that we had this discussion and determine whether or not he's gonna take 2 years of language based on practice versus what the course book says, so we probably should memorialize it.
Normally, we don't set procedure in a course handbook approval,
Okay?
but I'm just,
No,
So
you're
can we
right.
just
Typically, we
defer the
don't.
motion to spring?
we need to approve the
Can't.
course handbook.
Yeah, we have to.
before-
Registration.
So students can
starts in
register
December.
starting in December.
Teresa, you look like you're.
Excuse me.
I keep looking at the physics thing and I keep thinking, I just want to say that anybody who had a B- in math and science is really going to struggle in AP physics. I mean, I trust you guys would, somebody,
Would counsel correctly. I mean, some of it just.
doing
what's-
average in those classes and then taking AP physics is a very, very challenging course. I think a B-, I think you'd struggle.
Teresa, I know you were absent for whatever reason last meeting.
I was out of the country.
Whatever it was. Last time it was presented that one of the things we were taking out was a teacher recommendation, taking that out of
Okay.
the scenario, if you will, and now just making it on a grades
Right.
base, if you
And
will.
all I'm saying is that I think that grade is, that people getting that grade are going to struggle in AP physics.
And
I think
where
it
you
might be a
coming
little
from.
low.
So going back to how do we approve this memo says the French courses will now align with the expectations of all the courses and will be offered through the course book, but subject to enrollment. And I don't want that to be the case for French 1 and 2 until we do something different. So how do we either agree or disagree with me, but how do I make that a motion?
You repeat that
Well,
one
you can
more
do it
time?
one of two ways. You can either take a straw poll to see if enough people agree with you to make the motion, or you can make the motion and see if you get a second, and if so, if it passes on a vote. Right? Sorry,
Yes.
Madam President.
He's still in the English department of how he's going to word it.
Past the procedural piece.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve the memo
Course,
as presented.
Approve the course handbook as presented.
the course handbook.
But that's what it
Yes.
says.
That's what it says.
Well, this memo, yeah, course handbook with the exception that French 1 and 2 will be offered regardless of numbers, enrollment numbers, until we get the report in the spring, which is better information.
Make sure.
Meg, Mike, second
Will
that?
that be stated then in the book? Is that, I'm.
No, I can't be, you're right.
Can't.
Well, no, I guess, not the part about the spring, no, but 1 and 2 would be offered regardless of numbers.
That's what I'm asking, is that will be stated in the book?
It just wouldn't have the asterisk by 1 and 2. It's an
Right.
asterisk in the literature that says all French courses will be subject to enrollment.
Todd, could that put us in a pickle in that if you don't, say you don't have the numbers for the second year, that, from a teacher standpoint, that potential put us in a pickle? That we have a teacher, we don't have the students, but the course is still there.
Well, we would know in advance because registration staffing follows in March, based on what staffing is and, what student course selection is in December and January. So we would know what courses, and then we do the recommended staffing plan in March.
Okay.
So we would be able to make that decision after course selection from our high school students is completed.
All right, so we have a safeguard.
Mhm.
Okay.
So is your motion standard, has anything changed this?
It's,
So, okay, Meg, second, any other discussion on the motion?
Aaron, you look confused.
Yeah, I'm still confused.
I know that's,
I still don't get what's going on. What's going in the book? What are kids seeing? That's what I care about.
Can someone please review it? So we,
Based on what's printed here, it would say the same thing, only if you notice there's an asterisk by both French 1 and 2 and French 3 and 4, that then the asterisk says the French courses will now align to the expectations of all other courses, and that they will be offered through the course book, right?
What will be
Or is that
subject-
the way the course book reads?
That is not, that was communication to you guys through that
Oh,
memo.
okay.
There is not
Well, if it's-
that
Well, if it
designation
doesn't-
for other courses in the course handbook.
so part of your motion is to approve the course handbook, and part of your motion is to direct the administration to run 1-2 regardless, but not put it in the
Well, no,
handbook.
yes, and the students need to know that, and how do we communicate that to them? If they're gonna sign up as eighth graders, we want them to know that both classes will be there.
You leave that to
I
counselors.
think
Our
that's.
counselors do a great job communicating with the students.
If
Yep.
that's the answer, that's fine.
They do a great job.
Yes, my motion stands as is.
Yeah, I think the odds of relying on you to just read the course book is probably not enough.
So doesn't your motion need to be altered to not add that caveat about 1 and 2? It just needs to be, we
As
approve the course
presented.
book as presented.
And then the
'Cause you
communication
altered it.
piece.
But I don't know.
But it was seconded, wasn't it?
Yes.
You guys can do what you like. We good?
Do I have to revoke my second? Is that what we're asking?
No, I
Okay.
don't know procedure like that. I just.
All right, are we ready to, is that a motion people are comfortable with voting on? Because you can, Aaron, you still don't seem, or you can always vote
I was
against it.
gonna
as
vote
well.
against it.
Yeah.
So are we voting on one with a note in there that says that 1 and 2 will run regardless?
Is yours a note or is it a direction to the administration?
Are you asking Ryan?
I'm asking Ryan, because he made
Yeah.
the motion.
Dr. Layden? Yeah, I think
It-
you understand what I'm
think
trying
it
to
shouldn't be
accomplish,
in
but
the
I don't
motion.
know the minutia of how.
No,
they-
it can be as presented, and then we know that the procedure to take away is to make sure that our counselors, who, again, do a great job with our students, are informed enough to educate our eighth graders when they're picking their classes, when they come over. When our counselors come over here to talk with them, they will make sure they communicate that.
I'm fine with that.
So you're saying as presented is your motion?
Yes.
You're comfortable with that? Are you comfortable seconding that, Meg?
Yep.
one last comment.
Yes.
I'm far removed from eighth grade. But are parents, do the students take a thing home and or obviously involve parents? Would they have influence, if you will, of the student when they go to the counselor?
Good question. Mr. Riley, do you happen to know the timeline of when counselors meet with students and then they take home what they would like to their parents, and when is that due back? Or maybe one of our counselors or someone else could answer that?
I believe it's finalized in January and February with Jill at the high school.
So is your concern, Pedro, that that's not marked on the form that the parent signs?
No, I'm just asking. Informational wise. This young lady seems to want to say something.
I'm Erin Shore,
Sorry.
Director of Student Services.
Do you mind?
Can I answer questions?
Yeah, you need to.
Okay, let me see if I can help everybody. Trying to be polite with all the rules here. I'm Erin Shore at the Kaneland High School, the Director of Student Services. We meet with the eighth graders in December. Prior to that, we're the last stop, actually. They're going to come to our open house and get all the information from administration. That's, I believe, the first week of December. I'm meeting with the middle school this Friday with Carrie Osager to work with the counselors there and administration there to work on communication prior to that. So first week of December is open house. Second week of December, we've welcomed the eighth grade over for a field trip. We call them exploration days. They spend the morning with us, one team at a time, and they do four-year planning with the counselors. They run through other sessions with touring the school with our student council and the Fox Valley Career Center classes, just because those are so different than what they're used to. So that's the exploration days, then week 2. Week 3, all 5 of us counselors come down and have meetings with the students. It's pretty quick. It's not the conversation that you're referring to. That would be the open house, exploration day, those kind of opportunities.
And what was the parent piece?
Open house.
You said open house?
I get emails and phone calls from parents in those weeks. So
And that
that's
is when? The open
first
house.
and second, first week of December. I believe it's
Okay.
December 2nd, but first week for sure.
And then it would also be communicated during the 4-year planning with each student if they
Yep.
expressed an interest in those classes.
Exactly. They run through a 4-year planning session with the counselors. That's probably a third of the red team, if you will, at a time. So it's still a large group with the 5 of us. It's not a one-on-one thing, but they would all get communication at the open house and then that exploration day with us.
Awesome.
Okay, so the only time that the parents are included in that is when?
Open house.
Open house, okay.
And then our goal is to communicate and have the same language with the middle school and high school so that parents could call either school or whoever they're comfortable with and hear the same motion going forward.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so your motion is to approve the Kaneland High School course handbook as presented. We would like some of the minutes tweaked as far as how that's going to read. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Meg seconded. Any other discussion? No, we're good? All right, roll call.
Mr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to J4, indicators of success.
Thank you. At this point now, we're going to transition to sharing our indicators of success. If you recall, during the 18-19 school year, we created the indicators of success as a snapshot of who Kaneland is and what we believe is important, because the school report card and the state reporting data, there's so much of that, so we tried to narrow it down by grade spans to determine and highlight some of the areas that we were going to focus on. So as part of this presentation, Dr. Mumm is going to share the EC5 indicators of success, and then Patrick, who you probably saw for a little bit up here at the microphone, he'll come back and share 6 through 12, and then I'll share some of the school report card findings. But I just also want to share as a reminder that in February, we're going to do more of the comparable data dive. So tonight, when we go through a lot of this information, we're also going to put this link and the school report card link on our website. So that way, if we get questions, as we get questions from our board, we can take that information and be able to answer those questions in February when we do more of the comparable data. So if we don't go into these as in-depth as you would like tonight, please make sure you note what your questions are, and we'll be able to address those questions in February. Okay? Dr. Mumm?
So we're going to start, as Dr. Layden said, with the 3 elementary, the 3 across the top. So we'll start with the math cohort. All of the data is reported as a cohort, so they start with their graduation year. And so our last year's kindergarten was the class of 2031. And then we track them over the course of time within that assessment. In some cases, you'll see multiple data points. In some cases, you'll just see 2 data points. The reason for that is anytime the assessment has changed or shifted, you need to go through an accreditation process so that you're comparing the exact same type of assessment with the same type of assessment. So if we change comprehension questions, let's say, or for the center graphs, we change the Rigby expectation levels, the reading levels for benchmarks. And so the past 7 years of data was under one assessment expectation. And so when we changed it, you see just the comparable ones under that same assessment. A couple of these things, uses, this we don't use necessarily to look at individual students' progress, obviously. We use those same assessments, but we have student profile sheets that have their individual data on it. And that's how we make response to intervention decisions, peer learning experiences, customized path experiences, those types of individual learning is really not done with this type of data. As Dr. Layden said, it gives us an overview picture of district progress. I use it with the principals to look at trends in cohorts of students to see staffing-wise, teaching-wise, what's happening curricular-wise within a grade level. Is there a professional development need in a grade level? Is there a curriculum review cycle need, which I think you'll see on one of our charts. So the FAR math one, as you can see, the math continuum has been something that we've been implementing and developing. We developed it 3 years ago. And so ideally, we want to start to see consistency in the use of the continuum. Not all classrooms are required to use the math continuum in the learning environment until next fall, but you're starting to see those that have used that continuum and the students that have started on a math continuum process learning having kind of that upward trend. There's definitely a grade level that the administration and I have talked about of why did a cohort bump up and then kind of came back down. And so that has been a conversation that the principals and I have had. Was there a difference in, their fourth grade year not using the continuum, but they did in their first 2 years? And so we've seen that overall, math remains fairly consistent. We're kind of in still that implementation time. And so by the time we get fully implemented in the math continuum, we want to see the scores not just plateau, but start to then go up. And we're starting to see that with some cohorts, but as every implementation dip, it takes 3 to 5 years to see that plateau come up. Your first 2 years, you kind of sometimes see a dip and then it comes up. And I feel the math charts show almost exactly that research theory of the implementation dip. The center one, thank goodness we're doing an ELA review because this has kind of been, yeah.
I had a math question.
Awesome.
You said that you looked into the one that, I'm colorblind, so I can't.
Yeah,
one you said was up and down, yeah. What did you find?
We found that there were some instructional differences among the different teams within that grade level, and so we've asked them to work with instructional coaches or pair them with some other teams that are job-alike across the district to share those practices. Yep. We also had a little bit of a population move-in that grade level, and so it's a little hard to say, when you have mobility, that was our one grade that had the higher mobility of students move in, not that we have a huge mobility rate, but that was the cohort that had the most move in the newest year. And so hard to say if that probably played a factor to it as well. Our ELA, we know we have had, as Patrick said earlier tonight, and you'll hear again in our next presentation, we try to do a curriculum review cycle, so it falls within a 5 to 7 year process. ELA, specifically reading, is at about 8 to 9 years right now, and when you get the further out in a review process, you get some inconsistency in the delivery of instruction. It's still the same curriculum map, but there's sometimes some inconsistency in the delivery and expectations, and those review cycles allow us to recalibrate, redefine our non-negotiables and redefine our curriculum, and that's what we're doing right now with our reading ELA. And so this data is quite sporadic, especially looking at some of our second grade years. We've really looked at why do we see kind of a jump in reading, but then in second grade, as you know, probably just in having your own students, that second grade year, you're no longer learning to read, you're reading to learn, and that's a huge jump for some of our students. So nationally, you tend to see some of the data go down in that transition, but that dip is too far down. We want to make sure by reaffirming our ELA curriculum, which you'll be approving hopefully this February, a new reading program, that these scores maintain a little bit differently in the next couple of years, because that tells me there's a little bit too much variance in the instructional settings for the students. Writing is the opposite of that. We did implement a full writing program and the same consistent writing rubric, and you can see that it's coming out to the top, coming out to the backside of an implementation dip. We're getting to the point where we have consistency in writing instruction, common language from grade level to grade level. We're still with only our first or second year. In some cases, some teachers have done it for 3 years of the new tool. But you can see we're starting to see more consistency in the gains over time with our writing curriculum, and that's kind of how we want our overall data to look. And so that's hopefully what we'll see math get a little bit closer to, and reading as we implement the new programs and resources and reaffirm our practices this spring through the review process. That's what I would hope to see with the ELA next year. Those are my 3. Other questions on any of the content?
Your statement you made, the cycle for the ELA, 8 to 9 years, is that what we want? Or you want to
It
shorten
is not. We're going to talk about that in our next presentation. Ideally, research would say you want to review every curriculum 5 to 7 years, but with some budget cuts and having a budget that was set at $300,000, you can't get a review cycle paid for in 1 year. You have to then implement, we'll do K1 first, and then we'll do 2, 3, and then we'll do 4, 5. And unfortunately, we've been in a catch-up cycle for a little while.
All right, thank you.
Yep. All right.
I will jump in talking about, starting with our 8th graders passing algebra. We're at about 21.3% last year. And some of the things Dr. Mumm had hit on in looking at that number comes off a little low, but that is a reflection of the number of 8th graders that are taking algebra compared to that whole population. And that's not, every 8th grader is not taking Algebra 1 at the middle school. To give some correlation to this year, we currently have 67 students of our about 340 8th graders that are taking Algebra 1. They're all, right now, all 100% of those 67 students are passing. The reason the number, in particular in Kaneland, compared to the state is a little bit lower than what the state average is that as we look through our math, and we're continuing, Dr. Mumm talked about that ELA review, 6th through 12th right now is looking at our math review. And our focus really is passing Algebra 1 by the end of freshman year. And some of that's reflected in a graph that we'll talk about in just a second of the number of freshmen that we have that are on target for passing. But really what we're doing in aligning our math practices are really more for the depth of knowledge for our students. So we're looking at more, not so much accelerating them through to push them to get to algebra through 8th grade. We want to make sure that the math that they're taking, they have an in-depth understanding of it. So while that number is a little bit lower compared to the state, what you'll see where we supersede the state is in our freshmen that are on track to graduate and on track to pass. That number is a little bit higher because our students are embedded in practices where they're going in depth into those math concepts and those math practices.
So the legend says, can't read.
21% of 8th graders pass Algebra 1 in the district.
And 30% of the students in the state?
Correct.
How many students in the state take it? Is it similar to the numbers that we're seeing? Or?
That I'm not sure. I know there has been a push in the past to have Algebra 1, a good number of 8th graders to pass Algebra 1 by the end of 8th grade, and that focus for Kaneland has faded a little bit in order to go into that depth, and our focus is to get freshmen to pass that Algebra 1 level.
Because I find the slide confusing. You said we have 60-some kids that are taking it right now, and they're all passing it.
Currently, correct.
I guess I don't like the slide then, because it doesn't accurately reflect what's going on. If you're using the state standard, it's not total population of the state taking the test, it's population of the students that are being successful in a class. So you're comparing two different things, if I'm understanding you. And I might not.
Is that an indicator the state has of success, though, 8th grade passing of
Yes.
Algebra 1?
Yep, pulled from our school report card.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, so the state the state recommends, I don't know if that's too strong of a word, that you pass Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So the fact that we're deferring people to freshman year is what's reflected in that.
Not the number that are passing the class, it's the number.
Correct.
I think that's what Ryan asked.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the slide doesn't do a good job of conveying that information, I guess. And wouldn't have, I would, if I was just a parent and I opened up the next slide, I would say the state's average is at 30, we're at 21, we're doing badly. But that's not really.
We aren't focused on what the state is there. I mean, that,
No,
yeah.
and
Yep.
that's my only point, is that
Yep.
the way it's presented, it just, if you glance at it, it says, we're doing better.
Some people might say that is bad, to not take Algebra 1 as an 8th grader. I mean, I don't,
I'm not debating
yeah,
that.
yeah, but so, you know, I don't know.
I had to ask questions.
Are we
to
not
understand
following
what
the
slide
state
was saying,
guidelines?
That's all. Now I get it.
And then, can I just say one thing? As a reminder, up in the right-hand corner, there's a little light bulb on each of those that shows, that's more of the declarative information that is what's in that box. And you'll see when we get to the school report card in a second, a number of these are taken from the school report card, and that is one of them. So that's a data point from the state.
Okay.
So on that bubble, if you were to like break it to local to us, a 67, 8, whatever that number was. And did I hear all of those students are passing it?
Correct.
So that would turn into 100% from a local standpoint. Yes?
That graph would look way better, wouldn't it?
So is it, so what
I'm
makes you?
just saying, you can represent, I'm working numbers all the time, it depends on what you, how you
So
want to
what makes you
represent it.
prepared for college? You know, is it Algebra 1 as an 8th grader or 9th grader? I think it's just trying to indicate student preparedness for the next level and not so much everyone's passing. It's just a,
Yep, I apologize. Our local focus has been more in the latter of making sure that our freshmen are prepared by the end of freshman year with Algebra 1.
but that's just sort of what it's getting at is, it's not can you pass Algebra 1 someday, it's are you doing it at the right time?
Right.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate, that 21, whatever that number is.
21.3.
Is, compared to 60, whatever number that was, compared to the total that we have in that class?
Correct. So this number represents, the entire 8th grade class, 21% have passed Algebra 1.
And that, but it only reflects 67 of those, or 68 of those, yes, no?
Only
Around there
67 trials.
currently. So
Yeah.
this is reflective of last year's number. So currently, 67 students are taking and passing Algebra 1. But that 67 students it's around 19% of our 8th grade class. So if we put this number up for this year, it would be about 19% because we have 67. It's a little bit higher because we
Right,
do
right,
have 2
understand.
students in 7th grade that are in algebra, just how their path has taken them. But that number for this year would be about the same. It's indicative of the number passing compared to the entire 8th grade class.
And that number, we're saying that number because that compares it to the state,
Correct. That information comes from the
but not
state report
necessarily
card.
local. Because if you mix apples and oranges, in my words, you got the total, and which it's irrelevant in a sense, because you're only talking about these 67. The current number, I don't know what numbers change.
But the 30%.
And those numbers are, if I heard you correctly, are they're all passing.
But the state might have 100% passing too. It's just saying that less kids in Kaneland are taking it and passing it.
So you said, Patrick, that our goal is for freshmen to do that. Are we shifting that goal? Are we moving it? Are we thinking maybe it should be 8th grade? Are we trying to catch the state in that number?
I think our goal in looking at our local practices is to make sure that our freshmen, by the end of freshman year, are passing Algebra 1. And that, in going through, and when Dr. Mum talked about our continuum work of really laying out what each of those standards, each of those units looks like in depth. So I'm not passing a one-time assessment and moving on to get through that process quickly in order to get through algebra by the end of 8th grade. We don't want anybody to get through anything. We want them to be able to retain that and have that deeply embedded in their practices. In the way that our math runs through 8th grade, we're going deep into those practices, and then our number's a little bit more reflective freshman year of the number that are passing.
So would it be safe to say, so we're slowing it down to go into depth?
Correct.
Are we seeing that pay out though in the end then? Are we seeing that by going into that depth that students are more successful at the end of this process? Or is that a worthy thing to invest in, is my question.
I believe so, because then when we look at the number of freshmen that are on track to graduate, that number's at about 95%. So it looks to be carrying over into our high school.
So it is paying.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
One last comment. So they're taking Algebra 1. Do they take that Algebra 1 into freshman as well? And where I'm going with that is that number carried on to get that 95% or whatever,
Yep.
or those students moved on to Algebra 2 and they're not included in the Algebra 1 as freshmen. See what I'm saying?
Yep, and that indicator is not necessarily looking just at Algebra 1. Then the freshman indicator is looking at that have passed a certain number of semester and have earned semester credit. So it's looking at those in the full scope. 95% are on pace to graduate, meeting all of our graduation requirements.
But that doesn't have a class you're trying to reach. Like, this is Algebra 1,
Correct.
8th grade. It's not saying you have to reach, calc to grad. It's just saying any 3 years of math, correct, gets you to the 95%.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not trying to hit a certain class.
As long as you are producing success, I'm good.
So how do you then deal with students who, or at what point do you talk to students who have a STEM interest, who are going to need to be through Calc 1 or Calc 2, but at the end of high school? Again, you'd have to be getting them really early, and at that point, I'm not sure they know.
How do we identify them?
Because there might be some students that have, there certainly are students that have the ability,
Yep.
and they're recognized early,
Yep.
and they're accelerated.
Yep.
But there are students who may have a strong interest in STEM that just may take a little longer to get there. And so completing algebra at the end of freshman year is not going to get those students where they need to be.
It could still get them by their senior year into an AP Calc class, or it would get them into a higher math class because they would do Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2,
It delays your
and then
physics, though.
senior year.
It delays everything if you're not in Algebra 2. So but I think some of them double up freshman year with Algebra 1 and Geometry.
So you guys have ways, that's
to
all
be
I'm
able to
at.
get
I
to
don't
the
need-
Algebra 2.
Yep.
You guys,
To be able to get to the
you guys
physics.
have ways to steer those students in that direction.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't want it to be a selection process where only those who have the higher ability are the ones who can go into those,
Higher
who
level
can
courses.
go that direction. Anyway, that's not what I know that's not what we're talking about exactly, but.
The math 6 through 8 and the ELA 6 through 8, there's a little bit more in-depth explanation, as Dr. Layden had said in those light bulbs. That's looking at an iReady assessment. So that is a percentage of students that had made growth that are at the meets and, so the number of meets and exceeds at the beginning of the year, we take this benchmark, basically a pre and a post. So in the beginning of the year, the percentage that are meets and exceeds that grow to the post test, we take that again in the spring. So that's looking at math and ELA through an iReady assessment. And what that does, it's a diagnostic test, so students take it and it increases or decreases in difficulty as they answer questions correctly or incorrectly. And then what teachers can do is take that diagnostic and then they can start to tailor their individual instruction to a student based on their needs. So it breaks it into a variety of different standards. There's a teacher toolbox to help support areas of weakness and help to support areas where students are really doing well. But that is a local piece that we use through the iReady assessment. And that is, it tops out at 8th grade because we just use it K through 8. Honor roll, it looks at our high honors and our regular honor roll. I do have some numbers for that. Yes. Do we want to go into that tonight?
If it's a quick highlight, sure.
Yep, so our middle school, we're anywhere between 65 to 85 that are at the highest level, those high honors. At our high school, from freshmen through seniors, we're anywhere between about 110 to 150. And then again, middle school, we kind of see it flip-flop. We have about anywhere between 120 to 150 at the honor roll level, and then at the high school between 50 and 75. Our SAT composite score again, as we see how does this play out through the course of students in the high school, here we start to see our student not exactly where we want it to be, but the state average for that meets and exceeds on their composite score is at 26%. And our Kaneland students are scoring at about 34% for that meets. And there's about 11% at the state level that's exceeding, and we're right at about 10. So that cutoff for ELA and math is about 540, 550 for meeting that threshold, and then a score of about 640 to 650, depending on the test, to consider exceeding that score. The next few charts that we have down there kind of tie into a little bit of what we talked about. One is the number of students that we have that are taking college level coursework. Right now, that consists of AP testing. We do have plans, and we would like to see the number of dual credit courses that are involved in that grow. The blue, so that's the red. The blue chart here is then the number of students that go on to take that AP test and earn that AP credit. So it does decrease a little bit compared to the number that we have actually take the course. Students do not have to take that AP test. This is reflective of those that have taken it and passed that test. The Knights of Distinction, again, that is looking at a well-rounded picture of a student. So it looks at the different courses that are taken, from the core courses to fine art courses, and it looks at GPA, so not just the STEM courses or not just one particular type, but it's looking at those that have a high level of success, that have taken some type of honors course, again, some type of arts course, and still maintain success in the classroom. That is about a quarter of our population, about 28%. Our graduation rate, this is again pulled from our district report card. Dr. Lade and I have had a lot of conversation going back and looking at this. When you look at last year's graduation rate, it comes out as 91%, and you see that compared to other years where we're at about 96, 97%. And everything that we've looked at, we weren't able to highlight a given group that wasn't graduating, that there's a variety of different factors that are used to calculate this, and that calculation has changed. So what we think we're seeing here is this is a 4-year graduation rate. The state also, and it's reflected in our school report card, gives a 5-year graduation rate and a 6-year graduation rate. And the reason that some students would fall into those is that based on an individualized education plan for them, based on an individualized path, some may not be ready to graduate at that 4-year mark or earn an alternate diploma at that time. Sometimes that goes into a 5th year or 6th year. What's not represented on here that I think encompasses the new calculations and where we have been, our 5-year rate jumps back up to about that 95% rate, and then our 6-year is at about 96%. So when we look at that full scope of students that are taking a little bit extra time to carry out their individualized path, that graduation rate jumps back up to about what it has been in the past. Yes?
Could you, well, I'm ahead of the meeting by an hour or two, but could you give us more information on that, either your weekly update or a topic for the next, so that graduation is kind of what the goal here is?
Right. For sure.
I'd like more information on that, please, especially since that seems, maybe it's just the way the numbers are interpreted, but
yep.
Please, thank you.
And then that last piece on there is our GPA, and I know that's a little bit difficult to read. It recognizes that we have about 61% that are at that 3.0 to 4.0, another 31% that are at that 2.0. So 2.0 to 4.0, we're at about 91% of our students in that range.
Do you know how, what a normal distribution looks like? I mean, like, because I look at that and I think, there's a little bit of grade inflation going on. Because I think that's too many kids between the 3 and 4. But I don't know if I'm just looking at it from a different, maybe my numbers are off. It just seems like a lot of kids in the
Anecdotally, in my experience in the past, I would tend to agree with you that 3.0 to 4.0 seems to be a higher number. And I think some of the work that we're doing teases out some of those pieces where when we have discussions about standards-based grade, when we have discussions about an academic grade versus a behavior grade, I think we'll start to see some of that work itself out where we can report truly on a given set of standards. Here's how a student is able to show proficiency, and I think the practices that we are looking at in the future will have a truer reflection of where our students are at academically.
Okay. So are you saying being able to demonstrate proficiency will probably increase or decrease that? On some level, giving students additional opportunities might be why grades are different than what I was used to. I don't know. Or if you're saying if you extract some of the behavior piece, that could, just turning in your homework might not get you an A. You know, I don't know which way that was meant to be taken, I guess.
Yep, and I would say that I think at first, as we truly get everybody, every staff member on board, every student, every parent on board on what those practices look like, I don't know if that necessarily will translate to higher scores here, but I think eventually over time, it will be maybe not increase or decrease, but a true reflection of where our students are at academically.
Yep. Thank you. Again, if the indicators of success, we waited to update those on our website till after tonight, and then the Illinois School Report Card. By law, we have to have that posted on our website by the end of the month, which is November. And again, we'll do that. I'll be in touch with Ms. Hodak tomorrow to make sure we get those posted, but we wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to talk tonight before they were posted to give you any background information that you need that would be helpful. For the school report card now, if you recall, on the left-hand side, you'll see, I think there's like 9 tabs, and each one of those 9 tabs then open up to about 6 or 7 data points. So what I'm going to do is, if you go back to the first one, if you go back to the district snapshot, I'm just going to give an overview of what that information is. As you can see, a lot of that information that we have from indicators of success is taken directly from here. So you'll see on the school report card information that's directly tied to our indicators of success, because out of the 12 or 13 indicators of success, 7 or 8 come directly from the school report card. So if you see some of that information, it should look consistent. So I apologize that some of this is harder to see, but when you go on the school report card, you'll be able to see this more clearly and also be able to follow. And again, don't go to a different tab yet, but if you do go deeper into a tab, each one of these generally have the 1-year trend, 3-year trend, 5-year, and 10-year trends. So depending on how far you want to go back and look, there's a lot of information. So for tonight, it's more of an overview of that, because as you've seen, we've not even started a data comparison, and we've already started a data comparison. So what we'd like to do is be able to get feedback based on the indicators, feedback from CAC this week, and then also feedback from the board, and then anybody else who happens to see our school report card across the community when it's posted. And then we can come back in February and talk through some of that, and then also what our goals are based on those. Those that we've championed and done well, celebrate those. Those that are lagging behind what we expect, we can update those. So on this one, a couple things to note. Number one, for the first time, the school finances. For the first time ever, the state has done a site-based reporting. So before, it would just be the average for the district. Now, and again, we don't want to go down that far yet, but if you click on that one at some point after this meeting or another time, you will see that it's itemized out by schools. And you'll see that there are some differences in the schools, and what we'd want to share is in the comparables in February is that there are differences. The high school, which has more staffing due to coaches and activities, we have 2 Title I schools, and also we have an early childhood center at KBK. So if you look at what those are between, they're going to be between 11 and 14,000 on average, but different at each building based on that. Because I think what the state tried to get to was making sure districts that may not have always been responsible with their money were spending equitably across their schools and weren't favoring one school from another. So if you look at that and you have questions on any of those, let me know. The one that the state finds very important is there for commendable schools. If you recall, last year they were all commendable and the high school was exemplary. This year, all of our buildings are commendable. And the one thing that I would share is that the math in which to create that is very, very complicated. It's a score of, I think it's above 38% for elementary, above 9 for high schools, and it's between that number and 80. And then they slot the schools across the district. So what they say is there's going to be 10% that are exemplary. So even if your scores are off the charts or they've improved from year to year, you can't be exemplary unless you get to one of those top 10. So there were even local schools that found out what their ratings, their early ratings or their school ratings were going to be. But then if some other math was then different for that school and they got slotted to either exemplary, commendable, underperforming, then that could bump a school to a different category. So it's a number of schools. So it's 10%. If there's 800 high schools in the state of Illinois, that means 80 are going to be exemplary. So if you were close to that and some other school had their metrics changed, they could bump ahead of you. And by no doing of your own, other than some other district coming ahead of you, you then got slotted down, not down to commendable, because commendable is fantastic. We're doing great things.
So
But
you could actually improve year to year and still get a lower rating.
correct, based on how
If
other
a bunch of other
districts.
schools also
Yes.
improved and improved more than you did
Yes,
to get into that 80. Okay.
yes. And again, it's based on, there's real quick math. There's two different things that they use. They use local data, which is 25% of it, and then they use state testing, test scores for 75%. So it's a 75-25% split, and it says it on here. But then they do the math, and there's different grade points, or there's different percentage points given for about 8 different categories. You add those up, and then your 75%, and then your 25% is how then they determine where your school is ranked. The other thing, look on that questions, please check with me. Teacher retention, been about 86, 87 over the last 4 or 5 years. 90% is our highest, so that's something that we will champion and celebrate later. Dr. Mum, you can go to the next. Academic progress, you just saw a number of those data points from, again, that number, that's a state mandated, state dictated number. So that one in the 9th grade on track, those numbers are the ones that we had talked about a little bit. SAT scores, number of students participated. You can go to the next one, Sarah. You'll see a couple different numbers on average class size, and then you'll also see student ratios, and those are different. This one is 24. The other one will be a much lower number, but that's taking into consideration all the other positions that aren't in front of students. So it's counselors, social workers, psych. But again, that'll be more that we can dig a little deeper into. And then the per pupil spending. Thank you. These are our student demographics, student information. And again, if you click on any of those, it'll show you last year's, 5 years, and 10 years. And so we'll do more of that. So I think what we're going to have to do is, as we review this, figure out what to bring back in February, because that could be a 10-hour presentation. So we'll try to target, Pedro's shaking his head, and I would agree with you, no to that. But we'll identify those that we believe are relevant. We'll share with those in advance, and if there's any other feedback that you would like us to bring, let us know. Dr. Mom? Teachers, here's like I shared, the other one was 24 to 1. This one is 16 to 1. So we'll share why those are different. Again, the teacher retention was 90%, which is awesome for consistency purposes for our students. Again, as you talk about consistency, one new principal over the six-year period of time, that is great for consistency for our students and for our staff and for the community. Thank you, Sarah. And then again, the last slide, the retired tests go into other retired ACT, SAT tests that we've taken, Explore tests for students. You can look at that later, but on the schools in the district, it just highlighted the 6 districts and the fact they were all commendable. So that's a great success. Kudos to our staff, to our teachers, doing a great job with our students to be commendable, which is in the top 75% of the schools in the state. So we'll share more information with you on that as these are now linked. If we hear information, we have questions, we'll make sure that we respond, and we can also update you in February. And if there's other targets you want to see or comparable information, please let me know. Good. Thank you. Thank you for your work on that. To get to that school report card information, it's very nice and it's very snappy, but it's months of work from Ed Services, from HR, finances, and our data entry folks. So while people can look at them and see them, it's very user-end friendly, but the amount of work that goes into it is enormous. So thanks to all of our staff that takes the time to do that so that we can have this information to have these discussions. So thank you to those, and please share our appreciation with your staff members. Julianne also.
Are we good with that?
Yep. Get seated. Thank you.
So J5, report on Ed Services and technology budget.
Yep. If you recall, at a couple board meetings, we had talked about trying something new and different. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Fuchs, and she'll kind of explain what we've done leading to this point and what you'll see at this meeting and the next meeting.
Thank you.
Yep.
If you'll recall, we are beginning our process for planning for the 2021 budgeting year. In doing so, I prepare a 5-year financial projection model. In that model, we have the ability to put in our assumptions. At late September, as Dr. Layden mentioned, I brought the assumptions and some recommendations based on past practice. During that meeting, the board indicated that you would like more details and information regarding some of the larger areas where we have control over our expenditures. Tonight, we're planning to share with you the Ed Services information and the technology information. At the next board meeting, November 25th, we'll bring to you the capital plan and the transportation information. With both of them, along with tonight, lots of additional data. Either after tonight or after next board meeting, I will need some board consensus on what dollar amounts you want me to use for the financial projections in the model so that I can give that presentation to you in December so that decisions can be made. So tonight, what you're looking for, I believe, was the purpose of the additional information is to decide if the amount of money that has typically been allocated to these areas, if you want to increase them or decrease them based on what you hear, what their needs are, and what they are planning. In terms of their information tonight, the most important information and the most detailed information will be for years 2021, which is next school year, but you'll also hear some highlights of the 4 years following. The further out you get, the less clear it is exactly what we need and want. Additionally, please remember that throughout this year, leading up to the spring, we are working on a revised or updated strategic plan. With that being said, there may still be some unknowns, and that's why we want to make sure that we plan for what we need, but also leave some flexibility for any unknowns that might be an outcome or an impact from the strategic plan that'll be finalized in the spring. So at tonight's meeting, we're looking for some feedback. If you have it, you may need to wait until after you hear the other 2 presentations. But nonetheless, as soon as I get that information, I will plug it into the financial projection model. We'll bring that presentation in December, and make decisions based on that, so that when we get back from winter break, I can give all of my departments and buildings their allocations so that we can build the budget for the 2021 school year. So with that being said, Patrick and Sarah, Dr. Mum and Mr. Raleigh will do the ed services, and then Mr. Tim Wolf is here to talk about technology.
Thank you. So it makes sense that technology and ed services really on a night together, because you'll hear in our presentation as well as in Tim's pieces that are really intertwined. And at times, I think the two departments often wonder, is that my budget or is that your budget? Because they are really intertwined. We can't do many things within one-to-one learning, especially without that tech budget. And the tech budget devices wouldn't work, obviously, without Canvas, Hapara, licensing, and so you'll see that in ours. So it makes sense that we're really kind of intertwined as two departments. As Dr. Fuchs said, it's a different presentation than we've done historically, and so there's things listed on our budgets that are still in the projection phase. There's no specific dollar amount. It's a process in many of these cases of something we've started to review last May and are in the midst of review, and our timeline is always to wrap up many of those, review, research, that kind of process by February or March to bring the specifics here to the board. So there may be some opportunity where you ask us specifically, what is that $6,000? And our response is, it's a projection that we're still in the midst of researching based on shifts in staffing or curriculum tools. We are just in the process now of getting samples for curriculum tools that we're reviewing, and just in the process with our subgroups that review MTSS and personalized learning in projecting what structures are possibilities. By the time we come back with those final projection or final, I guess, requests at that time, it's not a projection, there's much more detail that we can answer about, here's the specific tool, here's the specific quantity, here's the exact job description of a staff member, how does that position maybe shift into a different position. But tonight, we're in the midst of all of that. Nothing on the pages would be anything that hasn't been in the process of development, the process of review, either through a strategic plan objective or through a curriculum review cycle or through a subgroup like an MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support review. There are two types of funding that are projected by Patrick and I within our department. Some are things that we're in process of, like the ELA pilot. We are piloting materials, and that's in process. And then there's some funding that you need to do ahead of even setting logistics, because you need a steering committee, you need brainstorming, you need the process of planning things. And so it's almost two different types of funding of we're in process and we need to buy things, or we're reviewing, taking a conceptual concept and wanting to bring it into practice, and you need a team to review what does that practice look like. So you'll hear both of those today. Ed Service is divided, the budget-wise, really into three categories. The curriculum review cycle, personalized learning based on Kaneland 2020 has been a focus for the last 4 years and will continue to be that focus in some way in the next strategic plan. The specifics obviously are not defined. And then, of course, both of those have staffing implications at times. So we tried to categorize in those three I guess, silos, but they're all very intertwined. So the gray shaded out is something that hopefully you should all recognize, because that's already approved and in practice. That's this school year, FY20. And if you can remember, we really looked at bringing in some pilots and some ELA 612 purchasing last year, as well as bringing on site licensing in a larger amount last year out of that account, because we did purchase Canvas and we did purchase Hapara, as well as some other online subscriptions like STEM Scopes and TCI.
The $252,000 in Chromebook leases, isn't that offset by student fees to some degree?
Yes, it is.
How much, roughly?
I'll let you know in a minute.
A third-ish? I mean, is that, because the lease is at the annual cost?
Yeah.
Never mind.
Because I guess I'm subtracting that out when it says total of $530,000, but you gotta subtract out the credit.
So we increased the student fees by $20. That increase added about $6,200, or I'm sorry, $62,000. but prior to that, it was about 200,000 that you collect overall, but some of that is still being used to support the other devices for the other grade levels. Because remember, the Chromebooks are only grades 4 through 12.
All right, so give me a guesstimation.
Of which number?
How much of
200,
how much of that 252 is offset?
most of it,
Okay, so.
yeah. I would say all of it.
All right, because when we talk about, you've said historically we do 400,000-ish, but I don't think in my mind I've included that 252,000 in Chromebooks in that, but that's on this report, so I'm trying to
Yep.
sift my way through it.
Yep, you wouldn't have included the 252 because that was a new expenditure. And the 400,000 is out of the curriculum department, the 252 is out of the technology. So that's some of the crossover
Okay, and
that
that's
we
what I'm
try
trying
to separate out.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
So just a recap of a little history. You saw the curriculum review purchases shaded in gray. The personalized learning, we did add through some grant funding, $35,000 last year, allocated to the development of proficiency tables for that process. And then all of you approved the staffing of the one-to-one instructional learning coach to really help with the Canvas upload or onboarding. And so all of the gray shaded area really is reflective of last year's purchases of kind of how did that funding source get used. We're going to look at FY '21 and '22, like Dr. Fuchs said, in depth. And then the other years are on there, very loosely projected. And at the very bottom of the educational service section is the 10-year curriculum review cycle that goes through FY '29. So from 19 last year to 29, you can see when is a content up for review. And that kind of tells you how some of the curriculum review cycle projected numbers come in based on historically looking at science, what has it typically cost? And that's how those projections happen. So Patrick will start with FY '21 curriculum review.
So looking at, looking at the curriculum review process for that year, with, again, that tech piece embedded in there, you see $137,000 for a yearly license. We have access to more license with the exposure to more Chromebooks and devices in student hands, but looking at the needs of truly the curriculum review, we're looking at about 650,000-ish. And again, that would, I think Sarah had talked about it a little bit earlier in the night. Currently with the number, with the dollar figure that we operate under, there are some of those tech pieces that come out of that curriculum budget. So what we have done is that we have spread those things out over the course of a year. Some of the implementation has been a year or two. What this number gives us would be what we would need to fund that entire year for what we currently have under review or what we need to make purchases for. So looking at that K-5 reading, we have a handful of teachers that are finalizing what materials are going to be best for our students. We'll need to purchase those. We are looking at some updated curriculum for our social emotional learning as we've worked across all grade levels. That piece, the social emotional needs, the social emotional education of all of our students is critically important. So we do have some money allotted in there, $100,000 for social emotional learning, grammar and word study at the elementary level, and then the middle school and high school, we are currently under review of our math, and that is looking at our curriculum maps, the standards, and there are some pieces that are shifting. We're in the process of laying out exactly what we are going to teach. And again, our philosophy is not to find a textbook and then we teach to that. We truly want to align our curriculum maps to what is best for our students. So the reason we're projecting about that 300,000 is that we're probably, and based on what we've had in the past, we're probably not going to be able to find one resource or one tool that fits the need of Kaneland's map. We're going to need to find pieces from a couple different vendors, or we usually find a main tool and then other other resources to supplement some of that learning. So that's projected historically of what we've needed in the past at about 300,000. So I know that number's a little bit high, but that is reflective of what we would need to fund all of that for that given fiscal year.
The other focus areas for next year beyond that curriculum review cycle that is on kind of that 5 to 7 year process is really the continuation of the personalized learning process from the Kaneland 2020. Within that plan, you've heard us talk about the honeycomb cells many times and the adoption of getting to know your learners through the learner profile, moving to proficiency-based and continuing to do that proficiency-based table. And then that third huge cell is building structures that allow for customized learning paths to occur. We're getting to that point where we really want to start investigating, so what does those structures look like? We've been on many visits and tours with other area schools, especially Southern Wisconsin, through the Institute for Personalized Learning, that have those customized path academies. Some are within schools and some are standalone academies. We're working with the AU STEM school to talk about how that standalone academy is created and those structures. That research work to adopt that last piece of the honeycomb takes a large amount of planning and dedicated staff to do that work. And so we're at that point where we're ready to look at not the implementation of customized paths, but truly that researching, the vetting the process, and creating the Kaneland Academy process for that. And so in order to get that work done, our department would need some extra personnel in order to conduct that research, go on those visits, work with the steering committee to determine what that academy process would look like, as well as a steering committee that would kind of look at what are the opportunities for students. How does blended learning play into this? How does a flexible school day for students play into this? What type of learner would benefit from those structures, and then what other structures need to be available, maybe not for the standalone academy type learner. And so all of that is captured in the last two columns with continuing work on the proficiency tables and having the steering committee begin that work in a 18-month to 24-month process of doing that intensive research of what does a customized path process either within a school or a standalone academy look like, with some additional administrative leadership to oversee that. We had a huge benefit of having a one-to-one learning coach approved last year, but that has become a very detailed Canvas coach and implementation of Canvas and use of Canvas. And one-to-one learning is more than Canvas. It's structures within the classroom, it's instructional strategies, and our current one-to-one learning coach is booked. It's tough for Patrick and I to get a meeting with her because her schedule is heavily booked and have been turning teachers away with some request at this point. And so we're seeing, based on the request for that learning structure, both for Canvas, how to use STEM scopes, TCI, and then any other online learning experiences and instructional strategies, a huge need to expand that department as well. I briefly talked last meeting when I was here about the multi-tiered systems of support research that's been going on for about 12 months with the K-5 team, and we're at a point, we just met today, of looking at a structure that seems to best meet the needs of the students and intervene both on the acceleration end as well as the remedial end, and that structure has some staffing shifts in it. We're continuing to vet the option. We just met in a small group, and our next step is in the first week of December to go to a full group and look at that structure so that we can have the details to you by February or March. And so there are some staffing shift costs in reallocating some positions to different tasks and categories that are included in here. Overall, that is kind of the focus area for 2021. Do you want to stop there and ask questions before we preview one other year?
Other than I got ahead of myself with my question before. I guess, so this 85,000 for a personalized learning coordinator and another 50,000, those are getting plowed in the budget forever?
They would be reoccurring costs. The one thing that I think you could look at with the coordinator, their task initially is really that research, logistics, and vetting what the Customized Path Academy could look like. And then if you open a standalone one, do they become I think we put it in a later year, the principal of that standalone academy. If you do an academy within a school, then that position would not be needed or need to be redefined, yes.
I guess I'm getting discombobulated with Vision 20.
Yep.
Kaneland 2020, or the next one.
The next one, well, it sounds like the next one's right here. You just told us what it was.
Well, I think that's the challenge of this process, was to bring 1 year, define numbers for the projections, but then give an overview of what would go into the next strategic plan. So these are just ideas that we are bringing and sharing, and again, not fully finalized because we haven't finished up the strategic plan. But we will have those discussions as part of it.
I guess it's a chicken or an egg debate, because Ms. Julianne wants the information to know how much to plug into our budget, but you're not going to finalize the plan and bring it to us until after she needs her numbers, if I understand you correctly.
Yes. But Julianne, do you want the process between short and long?
Yep, I absolutely agree, and that's what I tried to explain in September. It's a chicken or the egg. Do we give them their allocation and say, here's what you have to work with? Or do we decide which areas need more money and plan that way? Okay. So please remember, in December, with the financial projections, you're going to see, based on whatever we plug in, whether you have a projected surplus, deficit, or balanced budget. From there, if you happen to have a surplus, at that point you could say, hey, please put an additional X dollar amount into there for this purpose. Or should you have a deficit, you will need to reevaluate where where you would want to reduce some expenditures specifically for next year. At that point, nothing's been purchased, nothing's been committed, it's part of the planning. But then once we get into January, February, March, things are moving like we've talked about before. Okay. Additionally, don't forget, Dr. Atkins will be doing the staffing, I forgot to mention that. So these are the ideas for staffing, but these ideas are gonna be put together with lots of other ideas and needs throughout the district. So you're just seeing a little picture of it. The entire staffing plan will be brought to the board in February, March.
Okay.
So it takes time to build this. This is giving you some of the this is the information that I would normally sit down with and go through with them and bring a recommendation such as the 400,000. Okay. And then as we get further in the process, that's when the board comes along and says, do we have enough money for it? Yes, we do, because we put that in there, or no, we don't, we'll need to add that.
All right, so do these numbers get us caught up on your curriculum review schedule to where you want to be?
It does, and if you look specifically at that curriculum review process column from 21 to 22, you'll see it is large in 21 because of that catch-up process that Mr. Raleigh was talking about. But then when you get back on cycle, back to 300 needed, 380 needed, and so on. Because that is the typical cost of a cycle can range anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000. Because we've had to delay and do over a year a couple ones, our catch-up year is 21. We can always, go back and continue that delayed implementation process, but at some point, that catch-up comes. And so.
The 787 would catch you up.
Correct.
Right.
Yep. I think the one thing too, because I've had that same question in my head, Mr. Carey, about ending Kaneland 2020 and starting a new one. And in working through the strategic plans, we've never, even though the plan ends, it doesn't immediately stop everything we've started, but it does feel difficult to, I don't want it to feel like we've already drafted the plan, but in some ways, the work that Kaneland 2020 set us to do does continue. The new plan helps us define the how we can continue it.
Well, I guess that kind of goes back to my question. well, a long time ago about French, you told me it's 2 years to get something from go do it to it actually shows up in the classroom, so I understand that there's,
Yep.
you've got to look forward at things.
Yep. So then really briefly in 2022, the curriculum review cycle, instead of going really to a by content, because we would have completed a new review of by content, we want to start looking at some cross-disciplinary continuum teaching. And how do you blend, which goes right with the customized paths. If I'm coming and working in a customized path structure within a building, within an academy, how can I take a social science project and map it with the continuum of math and also have some ELA standards connected to it? And so that begins our focus on that continuum in multidisciplinary unit review. And those resources, because you've already purchased resources for the core content when they're taught by department or in isolation, the resource amount needed does go down in that next year.
Is that what that 350 savings is referenced?
Yes, yep, because you go from 650 back to 300. The site licensing, we still would need, and I noticed I didn't put it in that column, that continuing cost of Canvas and Hapara would be outside of that 300, but I have mentioned to Dr. Fuchs a couple times, between Tim's department and our department, where does that licensing go? So I often forget to put it in there.
It'll end up in Tim's.
Okay.
After it goes through its first year.
Perfect.
So,
Okay.
because that's, when we start the projection model, it will start with what's currently in the budget. The numbers that we're looking for is anything new that we want to add, take away, change, or update.
So going back to next year, we just got done with the school report card, and we all want to see those numbers going up. These numbers going, in your mind, going to get us there, is this what you need, or not enough, too much?
Never too much.
Well, I know it's never enough.
If you know me. I think it, Julia knows that well. It gets you there because it gets you to a place where all core content and exploratories and electives have been newly reviewed. We are caught up on the resources that teachers need to teach them. But what really gets students that higher achievement is student clarity in what they're learning and proficiency-based progress, and that's that customized path process. And so if we, from our recommendation, we really need to start investigating how can we give students opportunities to build their customized path and show proficiency at the point that they can exhibit proficiency and move on. If I can show proficiency after 6 weeks, do I need to stay in a class for 10 more weeks? And the answer would be no in a customized path proficiency type academy or structure.
So your answer is this is what it's going to take to get it done?
Yes.
Okay.
In our recommendation.
So without that part of the going further with the personalized learning with the academies and things like that, if we weren't to do that, to go forward with that, is all the work up to this point been for nothing?
It isn't,
I mean,
because
isn't that the goal?
it is the goal. It is absolutely the goal to have all 3 honeycomb cells in place, and that is truly the definition of personalized learning. You still have benefits. There's no doubt that implementing the learner profile alone has helped students self-reflect who they are and what they need as a learner, and help teachers accommodate advocacy of what you need as a learner. And so there's absolutely improvements with that, as well as building those proficiency tables allows us to have better reflection of what we are actually learning and segmenting out behaviors and organization from academic proficiency. To apply that in a structure takes customized paths. You can apply it in a traditional structure, but you still have a delay of time or not enough time for some students. Customized paths allows you to truly show proficiency and move, whether it's quicker or whether it is a slower process. It helps remediate and learn on your developmental level with still same high level expectations. So there's always going to be benefit of just implementing 2 cells, but it is not truly personalized learning until that 3rd cell is in place.
And Dr. Layden, it wasn't our intent with the strategic plan to stop it at
No.
halfway.
No, it wasn't a 4-year plan, finish it and then start something else.
Right.
There's always some continuity from one to the next, and that's why this is being shared the way it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So just to finish, 2022?
Yep, looking at that last part, those last two columns of that personalized learning focus and the staffings that would come with it with fiscal year '22. The balance with this is that when we look at the idea of an academy, that is not going to be for every single student in our district. It's going to be for a group that we're meeting their needs, and that's not a large group. So we need to balance all 6 buildings with the opportunity for a smaller subset where it is the best learning for them to be able to have some type of academy. So we're looking at a couple different things. Number one, we're looking, again, projecting about $250,000 for construction type projects. In visiting, and we've been into a lot of schools. Dr. Mumm had mentioned some schools in southeast Wisconsin. They have done a really good job. They've been doing personalized learning with the Institute, some schools upwards of 10 or 15 years. And some of the things we've seen from them, ideas of opening up classrooms, ideas of modular furniture, the idea to reach out beyond the walls when we talk about blended learning and opportunities outside of the classroom that might need to blend over into some technology infrastructures, things like that. So to the best of our projection, $250,000 would allow us to utilize some spaces that we currently have in district, mainly looking at like a Meredith campus, to reshape that area to provide an academy type learning environment to some students. With that, the next column talks about grade span coordinators. We are going to continue to move forward no matter what happens. So if we have an added academy or an added structure similar to that, we are not putting the rest of the things that our buildings are doing on hold. So we'll be looking at grade span coordinators to help us continue that work. Further along in that document, I believe in this document, we have about a 10-year projection of what the curriculum review cycle looks like. So that would be some of the work that those coordinators would be doing. It would be having some more of the conversations around traditional practices, some things that are currently happening. So that would be added to the work that we are projecting out for personalized learning, running concurrently with what we're already doing.
And the other years are on there, but that's where it gets a little blurry. So we've just done our best to project based on the review cycle that's laid out. We always try to have on hand, and truly for the ROE compliance, up to 7 years of what's next in the curriculum review cycle at any one time. And so this, we just extended out a little bit to 10 years. Questions on our part? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for having me. Exciting for me to show you some good stuff that we can do and are doing in the technology department, so thank you. So to start off, you can see our different buckets here for licensing, repair, Chromebook support, and new projects, and the total there. Julian, did
Yep, it's going down right now.
So the first thing I want to start out with are some current projects that we're working on and that they're continuing. And this one's really cool that I'm really proud of. We're going to roll it out here in the next week. It's called a Student Tech Profile. Parents and students will have access to this. And if you look at the left-hand column on the piece of paper that was just handed out to you, it shows information for parents. That left column, like I said, we'll be rolling out here in the next week. It'll show all the authorizations that parents have approved, whether it's the one-to-one handbook or they bought insurance for their Chromebook and so on. Then they can get some data on their actual student's device. What loan devices do they have? What current things are assigned to their child or student? And then repair history. how often is my child breaking their Chromebook and how often is it getting repaired? If you have the insurance, you're probably not too worried about that. On the right-hand side, this is some really cool stuff. This will come out in 2020, hopefully first quarter. We'll get some screen time data. You can see how long the student's been on the screen during the school day and in the evening. And then parents can talk to their child and to what they feel is appropriate. Also, then they can see what kind of applications they're using at Kaneland, what's most used on the Chromebook, and most frequently visited websites. We're going to pull all that data and be able to securely present it to the parents. They'll be able to use their Tyler login and password to get to this data. And if they have multiple students, they'll have one login, and they'll be able to click on the individual students and pull that data up. This is going to hopefully be a never-ending project. As we find other data that we can pull in that's pertinent to parents or curriculum, if there's data trends that helps educational services do their job, we'll be sending that data to them too. So I'm really excited about this project. And one thing is unbelievably inexpensive. Our good friend Nick Borg is helping me with this. And I looked at a similar project, and it was 10 times the amount we're paying per year. And this is just a one-time fee. So really exciting. So another ongoing is internet bandwidth. That's something that we always have to look at every year to make sure that we're supplying efficient, redundant internet paths and that we're supplying it adequately. Right now, hold on, let me jump to the next page. Yep. So we are meeting the demand sufficiently. We're not exceeding anything. Currently, we have a 1 gig connection from McDowell Elementary School and one up at the high school to NIU. I should rephrase that. We upgraded those to 10 gig to NIU at each location, but they supply us 1 gig of internet bandwidth at each location. The cool thing about that is we had an agreement with NIU that we purchased 2 gig of internet, so if the connection goes down at McDowell, they supply us 2 gig up at the high school, and if the high school goes out, they supply us 2 gig down at McDowell. Any questions on that? I'll jump on to our 2020 and 21 projects. So one of the big projects that we're looking at is redundancy. I'm always looking at data redundancy, network redundancy, internet redundancy. I would like to get server redundancy so that we have our data in 3 locations at any one point, and that we can bring up a server, whether it's at McDowell, this building, or the high school, we can have 100% of our data at any one time. And that's number 1 on there. The second thing kind of goes with actually number 4, but we have fiber throughout our school district, and I always want to make sure that all of our links up connecting all of our building. Working with NIU, that connection that we have down at Montgomery actually goes out east on I-88, heads up north and goes back to NIU. Our other connection at the high school goes up 88 west, all the way up to Annie Glidden, and then to NIU. They will give us a redundant path for what does it say, for $5,000 on their backbone. So if our district gets split in half, that we have secure path from the north end to the south end of our district. Currently, we're using wireless WAN links that are 10, 12 years old that can't support the data that we're pushing back and forth through it. I need to start looking at retiring those. They were good, reliable links. Some are 15 years old, but it's time to kind of move on from those. So that covered 2 and 3. Let me jump to 2 and 4. Let me jump to number 3. One of the things with our current internet service provider, NIU, they do a great job, but when NIU goes down, we go down. We need to look at getting a second internet service provider, so when NIU goes down, we can route traffic out that. We have so many cloud-based systems, whether it's student information, transportation, school messenger for blasting messages. It goes on and on. And when we don't have internet access, it kind of halts the entire school district. So that's an important one to me. Number 5, VMware is just virtual software we run on servers. Our licensing is not up to date. We're one version behind. I need to get up to the latest version. When I get on this latest version, that VMware actually is how we're going to make multiple copies at McDowell High School and here. If you guys ever want to talk on a side note, I can talk for hours on how that's going to work, but you probably don't care. I don't. And then the last would be the purchase of Chromebooks for the incoming 4th graders in the fall of 2020, or is it, 2021. Or, I'm sorry, 2020. And that'll be ongoing. So in 2022, will be also purchase of Chromebooks. We will need to look at replacing half of the staff laptops. I think that was last year we went through that. We purchased all new staff laptops, 400 of them, and we decided that we were going to break it up and do it over a 2-year period. So that would be the first year. And then we also need to evaluate replacing our Wi-Fi. It was initially put in 2016. It was the latest version at that time. It was 802.11 AC Wave 2. That's 5th generation of Wi-Fi. In 2019, 6th generation, 802.11 AX came out. You might have heard it called Wi-Fi 6 because everybody doesn't like the engineering terms of the 802.11 blah, blah, blah. So at some point we have to look at upgrading to that. We're pretty rock solid right now with our infrastructure with the wireless. You'll see access points all over. We have one in every classroom. It's handling all the Chromebooks we have. We have no problem handling that, but we have to look to the future of curriculum and what kind of HD video that students are going to be using, and so we'll evaluate that in 2022. 2023, we'll have another Chromebook lease, and then do the second half of the teacher laptops, and then the ongoing Chromebooks for years after that. The last thing I have on here is staffing needs. Thank you so much for the additional staff I got for support for repairing the Chromebooks, but what I didn't predict was all the extra on the back end management of networking and everything else. We are constantly getting more things, more doors on the network for accessing, you name it, heating and cooling on the network, security issues on the network. It just goes on and on and on. And we can do some really cool stuff, but I just don't have the staff anymore. One great example is for Mark Payton, our maintenance director. We were putting electrical panels on the network and then graphing what electricity they were using. And if he got a spike here or there, he'd go back and see, well, why is this wing of the building drawing more power? Well, with the staff I have, we can't support that anymore. We can't build out. We're just going day to day and surviving. So that piece right there, another person who can do network administration. I have one person right now who does all my network administration, all my server administration, and handles any kind of higher end data. So, and he works like a horse. So, great guy, but I need to keep him around. And this would be cross-trained too. So now I don't have all my eggs in one basket. So.
And what year is that in?
Sooner the better.
Well, I'm looking at 21.
No, this was just a note at the bottom. It wasn't put in a year. Ideally, it would be 2020.
You're asking for one person? Or
Just one person.
Okay, okay.
Yes, a higher end.
With cross-train, but then you already
Yeah,
have the one.
I already have one. Yep. Yep, and he has projects that are tabled out several months. You know, you approved more security cameras here, we added a server. The server's just sitting there waiting to get installed because he just doesn't have time for it.
Ryan, it's not in the budget anywhere right now. It's
No.
just a note at the bottom.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So-
It'll come with the staffing plan as we,
Are
in
you gonna
February.
put it under staffing versus
Yeah.
technology budget? Is it,
No, it goes in there.
what?
That goes in the technology budget. Right?
Yes and no, but it will come with the staffing,
Right,
Correct, just to,
The timing.
the timing.
yeah.
the timing, but the budget itself goes
So
through
you want
technology.
800,000 for next year, if I read this right?
Yes,
Does that include that position?
no,
No? 'Cause it was at the
that
end, right?
does not include any staffing, correct, Julian?
Correct. It would have to be more than that with staffing.
So if I say, sure, Tim, you can have the guy, do I add the number here, or do I add it to your staffing budget?
Should add it to the staffing budget when Dr. Atkins brings that in February, March. We wanted to give you a heads up on here what the needs are.
And that's fine, I'm just,
Yeah,
it's
just
in there
asking.
somewhere, and when we see the total budget,
That's
there'll be an
right.
extra person in there for.
Yep.
And if you compare to my department to surrounding districts, we're small. I mean, and we do well, and I'm very happy with my staff. They're a great group of people.
Well, I think one of the reasons that we've been so successful is there's been very little turnover. And so they've grown up with the systems.
I've
that
been
we've
here
built.
22 years. The first person I hired has been here almost 21 years. One nice thing is I'm a Kaneland grad. The person I'm talking about who does all this is a Kaneland grad. The person who's been here 21 years is a Kaneland grad. We recruit out of the Fox Valley Career Center. And Matt over there was out of the Career Center. We take those students, we bring them on, we train them, and they love working for Kaneland and for me, and they don't leave.
Which really helps us to be able to move forward that. It's just wonderful.
Tim, over the years, I've seen your vision and such.
And I'm getting old,
is-
right?
Well, aren't we all? Have you envisioned 5G coming at us?
So that will be a little bit different because 5G is harder for me to control because that's through cellular companies. So possibly, I haven't seen anybody do any infrastructure access points with 5G. So right now, it's the Wi-Fi 6 or 802.11ax. But that's a possibility. Definitely in homes and things like that. But I don't know about building infrastructure yet.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then maybe if we could
Looking
take,
forward to some tough questions.
if we could take a moment to help out the people next time, is this what the board was hoping for? Is there anything different direction they want to give to the next group?
I really like hearing the,
Separation.
you know, the updates. And I think from each presentation, you can pick out, I'm sure it may be 7 different things, but, I was able to pick out what I thought I heard were, must-haves, and it's helping with the surplus, like where the surplus might be able to go. I don't know that it, as far as the, making the projections any different, I don't know that that matters to me so much, but it at least helps me to see. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
Does that, any other comments?
No.
Trying to see you over there. No, okay. Is that, I know you're kind of directing some of the next group, what they,
It's absolutely what we've got planned. The capital plan will be similar because you've always seen that. It'll be similar, but we are adding a piece to it with a lot more details for every line item and where the whole plan. You've just gotten the high level of it before. We're giving you the whole list.
more details?
So that'll be the new piece of that. And then with the buses, we're bringing the repair information side by side with the age. Additionally, the mechanic has written some information of why he would consider this over that, and so there'll be a lot more depth there as well.
So the projects he went over, the 1 through 6, those are gonna be coming in as a request for 2021 then?
So, yes, so basically, again, the process will start with the financial projections in December. If all of you say, yep, this is where we want to be, whatever number I've used in there, say for example, 800,000 for technology, that will then go, in January, I'll tell Tim, you have 800,000 for your budget, and then he'll go ahead and line item it out and put it in the right places. And then in June, when you approve the tentative budget, we're ready to go.
Ready to go or accept what's in there?
Both. Both. By approving the budget, you're approving what you're seeing
Projections.
tonight, plus maybe some other switches and things like that of repairs and the things that he needs.
This isn't the final thing.
I understand there's no recommendation here. I just had some questions I didn't ask because it's getting long night, but, some
Is
of
there
this-
something I can prepare for you that we
No,
could
like,
answer in a Friday
one in
update?
particular one was, when the Wi-Fi or when NIU goes down, we go down and stuff, and my question with that is, how often does that happen?
Typically, in the last couple of years, NIU's gone down about twice a year.
Hence, I would question why we're doing this. Or why it's in here.
I would say at this point, when it goes down, learning
I understand,
slows down and stops.
I understand.
And so the higher percentage that we can keep the network up and running, the more learning happens.
That's why I use Siri to figure out where I'm going, but I know myself how to get there. Because when this guy goes down, I'm in trouble.
Okay, any other questions? All right, J6, approval of timeline for RFP for health insurance broker.
Yeah, similar to J5, the board's had some conversation on this topic, and as a result, Dr. Fuchs has done a ton of work. We've discussed this, and now she has some ideas on behalf of the district to bring back and walk the board through it and see what questions you have and possible next steps.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So the agenda or the board memo that you have is a proposed timeline to prepare for an RFP to look at brokers. Additionally, I've tried to put together a lot of data, so I'm going to pass that out and maybe run through that first. The data that I've been able to put together, I'm hopeful will start to draw a picture or a better picture of both Mr. Carey and Mrs. Wood's questions and thoughts, comments, and concerns, because those are the ones that I believe we've heard most often. And so with that being said, let me just share with you some of the data points. The first set of data points is that I've included our health insurance premium history increases over 9 years with an average of 4.1%. And then in the paragraph below that, you'll notice that CNBC reported that family coverage over the past 5 years has increased approximately 22% and 54% over the last 10 years. During that same time, Kaneland's 5-year total is 12.6%. I was only able to get a 9-year total at 36.5. So I feel that that's one data point I want to make sure the board knows, that when we say that this renewal and our increases have been fair, this helps to support that statement. Additionally, I've mentioned that the board has over time approved a number of changes to the health insurance plan. And so I've listed out all of the changes that I could find. Please know there may be more or less or a year. I'm pretty sure I've got most of the years right after going through all the different documents. All of these changes were a result of either the broker bringing them to us, or the committee asking for them, or the board asking for us to do. And then it came from the broker to the committee to the board for approval. So the board has approved all of these changes. Some of the changes came with projected savings, and others were for various other reasons. As you look through it, and I know you're just getting this data tonight, so, and it is late, I understand that as well. But I wanted to get it into your hands. On the next page, the insurance committee, I had mentioned we'd studied some things. These are the studies that we had done. Again, at this point, they are a bit dated. So if the board would like to direct us to study any of these potential cost savings, we would be happy to do that through the help of our broker gathering the data. Additionally, there are several school districts that have self-insured PPO plans similar to Kaneland. Of those, these are the annual broker fees for those districts. Additionally, everybody's using like a third party, like either Blue Cross Blue Shield or United Healthcare is the other big one, because those are the ones, we use Blue Cross Blue Shield, but at one point we looked at other carriers such as United Healthcare to see if we could get similar savings. So one of the questions is, how do we know that our plan isn't costing too much? You can see here in this example, we're right in the middle for our Blue Cross Blue Shield portion of our administrative fee.
First paragraph.
First paragraph, okay, I'm trying
Yep.
to.
Right, you know what, and I told you I'd put page numbers on and I forgot. I'm sorry, page 2.
Phase 2, thank you.
Yep. Some of the districts are in a health insurance cooperative, which is similar to our property insurance cooperative, but we've never needed and or wanted to go to a cooperative because as you saw, our premium increases are low because we take good care of our people and our plan. And so they all want us because we're healthy, but then we're gonna take on their unhealthy people when we go to a cooperative. So we've never really wanted to join a cooperative for that reason. So I'm gonna go to page 3. I'm kind of moving through a little bit quickly. Sorry about that. On page 3, this is the premium analysis comparison for single coverage. What this one shows is that the light colored is what the employer pays. The dark color is what the the light color is the employee. The dark color is the employer. And then how much the premium is. At the bottom, there's a table. You'll notice that Huntley's didn't show. Sycamore is still using a $300 deductible. So that's why theirs costs so much more. It is, and that's what you're gonna learn throughout a lot of the data points. You're getting just little bits in that of it because it's difficult because nothing is apples to apples. And so you kind of got to take it all in whole to determine how we're doing. So that the second Huntley, that's their $300 deductible plan. And then the fourth one after us, that's their $1,000 deductible plan. And that's why it costs less, because the higher the deductible, the less cost toward premium.
So do they offer, is that a choice for?
It is a choice.
Okay.
Yep,
So I was gonna say why there were two.
yep, there's a choice.
Okay. So they can take 1,000 or they can take 300?
Yep, and that's what I was telling Dr. Layden this morning. Whoops, let me finish this and I'll tell you what I told him this morning about the choice. Sorry about that. The next page are the family premiums. You'll see again Sycamore, much higher. Kaneland is next, and then the two Huntleys after that. The last page then, I put the contract language in here from KEA. The speak language is similar, but I wanted you to at least know what the language says. And then there are various ways to control our medical costs. These are the primary ways. There may be some other small ways, but these are the primary. The first one would be to change the employee cost sharing structure. For example, we pay 75% of family coverage. If we paid less towards that, that would save the district money. But that is a contractual issue that you have to negotiate. If we want to close a plan, such as get rid of our PPO and only offer an HMO, we would have to negotiate that. However, if we wanted to implement a high deductible plan, again, if you close a plan and implement a high deductible plan, that would need to be negotiated. But this is what I told Dr. Layden earlier is, but if we wanted to add some of these choices, we wouldn't necessarily need to negotiate that because we wouldn't be making them or decreasing their benefits. We would be adding options to them. The one thing that we've learned through our studies is that you have to be careful with what you add, because sometimes when you add things that encourage healthy people to jump on because their costs are lowered, it raises the cost of your other plan for your unhealthy people, which in turn raises your district costs. So at some point, there's probably a break even, but we've not explored exactly how that is. There's just studies showing what could happen and possible percentages, which is what led us not to doing anything in 10, 11, and 12, because at that time, if you look back, there were some higher percentage increases, and we were afraid that if our healthy people jumped on the HMO, the PPO plan would jump up. And again, unless if you're negotiating something, it's a choice that you're offering. So you have to weigh the pros and the cons of that. Usually, a health savings account is implemented in combination with a high deductible plan. And then what happens is your business or your school will offset the cost of the difference between the deductible of what it was and what it would be, and they fund it. So then you have to add that in, cost into your potential savings. We could also change our deductible, which we've done. I put that, there are a couple times that we've done that in the past 9 years, and both times that we've changed the deductible, the out-of-pocket costs were changed with it, and those were both negotiated at the time we were at the table. So I'm hopeful that some of this information and research provides you a more complete picture of the health insurance plan and what we've done along the way. I would be happy to provide additional information as you want or need. Just please let me know and I'll get you whatever I can do.
I'm guessing this isn't worth looking into now, but just seeing what Huntley does, that it seems to keep the employer costs consistent, and the change in deductible savings, or whatever you want to say, seems to be borne by the employee. Is that anything that you've had employees ask about? It seems like the way they did it, they passed that savings to the employee, so it's sort of moot for the district, but I was just curious if that's ever anything you've heard of someone hoping we did, wanting? Sounds like not.
I haven't heard it,
just
but,
curious.
yeah, nobody's ever asked me that
Yeah.
particular question.
I don't know if you knew why, like just knowing people from Huntley, if
I can check with them
Yeah.
very easily.
if that was something that was appealing to their employees.
I think sometimes that when you hear about a high deductible plan, you think of, that it's a worse plan. But sometimes the high deductible plans over the course of a year can be financially better for the employee and give as much or more benefits. And I'm speaking from, I'm in my open enrollment time, and I was on a PPO, and they have a new high deductible plan, and and it's Blue Cross, but it, like the high deductible plan, things it does is like the prescriptions, maintenance prescriptions are like $0. Okay, that coupled with the lower premium makes the higher deductible, even with the higher deductible, it's still a better financial deal for me. So that's the kind of thing I'd like to see where, it gives us some savings, it gives the employee some savings, and it's an additional choice. Not like get rid of the PPO and only offer a high, because some people can't, and some of our lower income staff members would not be able to come up with $2,000, if something catastrophic happened. So I'm just saying it's not always a worse plan. When you hear high deductible, you think, oh, I don't want that. I just wish the broker would bring some of those things to the table.
He'd be happy to if we asked him. And that's what I guess the question at this point is. Is a high deductible plan something you'd like more information on? Because we'd be happy to explore that and get the information and share it with you.
As an option.
As an option.
Because we just entered, at least with our bigger body, we just entered a 5-year contract, right? So we're looking 5 years out unless we add options, right? Is that what I heard?
Yes, yes. So it'd be as an option.
Yeah.
Happy to.
And again, the HSA does come with it, and usually, at least $1,000 is contributed by the, if it's like a $2,000 deductible, usually it's like the business or whoever, the district would put in like $1,000 toward it or whatever.
Yep.
On page 2, you listed the annual brokerage fee for 4 different districts. Are we the smallest of those 4 districts?
Yes.
So, I guess smallest by total insurance costs, or total health insurance? I'm trying to put these numbers into some sort of meaningful order, and that's why I'm asking the question. Because right now, you're telling me potatoes at 77 doesn't really mean anything because I don't have a basis of comparison.
And I don't think I have enrollment information with me. Let me double check. Or staff. I can certainly find that out. How many staff? I think I would do staff versus enrollment.
Yeah, just some sort of
data point.
Yeah, some way to qualify it.
Ideally, you would want to know how many employees are on the plan.
Right.
Because that's how the fees are determined. It's employee per month.
Yeah, some
For
sort
the
of
plan.
Because it's hard to look at that and make sense, use it in some fashion.
Yeah.
That's where my mind went when I saw that. It's like, but there's just numbers right now. I can't compare it.
Okay. Yep, I can definitely gather that information.
Any other questions on the
So ultimately, we asked for this information to try to make decisions on potential options, right?
No,
It was Ryan.
It was me.
I looked that way, man.
No, we buy insurance, my goal is to not change anything with the benefits that the employees get from the health insurance. But we pay salesmen or brokers in order to get that insurance. And we've used the same broker for many, many years. And I thought it was appropriate to check the pricing that we're getting from the broker because we haven't done it in a long time, is the answer to your question, basically.
Yes, thank you. I was trying to think for it. Yes, that was it. Thank you.
And then I jumped on it and said, and I think we should also look at other plans.
Yeah, and that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, it is, and
I'm trying to address both tonight,
Right.
just to keep
And-
that conversation so that you know that I heard both of you.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
ultimately, I think it was coming, the question was, when do we have the option to do this, correct?
And that's.
Broke, when do we take it out to go bid, if you will?
So are we ready to
That
move
was
to
it,
this?
right?
Should we go to J6? Is that where we're headed?
So on J6, what I've put together, and you're right, our broker has been with us since 2005, and his father prior to that for many, many years. So you're absolutely right. We have the opportunity to do an RFP, which is a request for proposal, rather than just a straight bid. With a straight bid, you're required to take the lowest, most responsible bidder. With an RFP, you can set up your criteria such that there is a rubric, and you can, you don't have to take the lowest, most responsible bidder. You can look at some of the criteria and decide what's most important and choose your broker accordingly. It's a similar process as when we selected our auditors and our architects.
And another point that came out was, how does that going to affect your staff when and if we make those changes? Did you mention that?
Not at all on here. And so what I'm thinking is with this timeline, we would use our current broker to get the 2021 pricing, and then July 1 is when that contract would start, so that once the pricing is in place, the broker has probably about 5 to 6 months in which to catch up on what does Kaneland's plans look like and what are Kaneland's specifics, assuming that if there's a change in brokers, there's gonna be a learning curve. That will give us 5 to 6 months for my office to be able to provide them with documents, with data, information, and make sure that he or she is ready for the 21-22 renewal. Because our current broker goes out to the market and gets us pricing every year for the various lines of coverage that we have. And so the new broker, if there is a new person, needs an adequate amount of time in which to have knowledge of what our existing plan is, so that when he or she goes out to price the market, we know we're getting apples to the best of their ability.
So there's a date, did you really mean to write February 24th?
Whoops.
19?
Nope, I meant to do 20, and I did it on all, I did 2020 on all of them except for the last one. Sorry.
Oh.
Change in a year.
Yep, I got the Januaries, but I lost it in February, sorry.
No, that's fine, I just,
Yep.
I guess I'm frustrated. It takes so long to do something. You deal with this every day, I don't. It just seems like a year and a half seems like a long period of time in order to get something bid.
6 months.
6 months, not.
6
I think
months.
you skipped a year.
I did skip a year.
So you're better, you feeling better now?
I better shut up.
Did it go past 10?
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
So what the plan would be is at the next board meeting, I'd give the board the opportunity to review the RFP. I would make that I'm assuming there may be some changes, so I gave myself just under a week in which to make those changes and get it out. And then knowing that you have holidays in there, I gave it a little over 4 weeks, which 2 weeks is the acceptable practice of a RFP. And then once we get all of them back, there's a holiday in there at the 3rd week in January. So I gave us about 10 days or less to screen them, to figure out who do we want to bring in, because I imagine we'll have plenty of interest in that. And then we'll figure out who's going to get interviewed by the end of January. The board interviews then, we have to set dates. If we want, we could back that up 1 week maybe to the 1st week in February. And then approve the contract. We're on board report or board dates. We could maybe try to hit the 1st February meeting instead of the 2nd.
No, I got all discombobulated. I was thinking 21, not 20, so that's, you're fine. In my mind, this is,
Okay.
yeah.
So any discussion about J6? Sounds good.
Not discussion, just a question of, how do you go about putting out your RFP? Because like you said, you have someone in your office that basically full-time job is.
I'll develop the RFP.
You'll develop it, okay.
Yeah.
And you'll.
Yeah,
include-
that's not her, yeah, that sits with me.
Yeah, because my goal is overall savings, so if you gotta hire someone else to work in the office to make this, but
Yeah.
you'll write it.
Yeah, yep, and, I'll get some examples from my colleagues, change it to meet our needs, run it past all of you. Yeah.
But to your point too, I think the rubric will be developed to take some of that into account as well.
Yep.
The staffing impact.
Can I ask it might be a silly question, I don't know. Do you know, do any of the other districts around us use the same broker that we do? Does everybody use a different one? Or is there one that like a bunch of other people use and we use this other guy who's an outlier? Do you have any feel for that?
I do. So we use one that, they also serve East Aurora,
Okay.
which is one of their newer clients.
Okay.
They have some other school districts, but they're more in the, suburbs instead of out this far. I know that, Sycamore uses a local broker in the area there. St. Charles and Huntley, both of them use at that point then, they all use different ones.
Okay.
Because, hang on, I don't know if I have all their names. But that's when you say, how am I gonna get it out? I'm also gonna send it to them. Additionally, IASVO has a list. I'll send it to them. So I'll push it out to the ones that serve schools. I'm just gonna, DeKalb uses a different one than everybody else. Let's see, and I have their agreement that I can model some things off of.
Is this territorial for them?
Territorial. For who?
They could do
they
this
have
region,
regions?
these guys do these region, or is it all general?
All general, yeah. Yeah, and Huntley and Batavia and St. Charles all have 3 different ones.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
Gallagher is probably, one of the more, popular ones because they run the cooperatives, but they focus on cooperatives. None of these people are using Gallagher.
Question.
So, yeah. All different.
So
God
you're
bless
ready?
you.
Me again, thanks.
So ready to make a motion? Yeah. Well, entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the proposed timeline of activities related to the RFP process for selecting a health insurance broker.
So moved.
In a second,
Second.
and a roll call.
Before we go there,
Oh, sorry, discussion.
the ones that use, yes or no question, the ones that use Gallagher, are their bill, if you will, higher or lower than, or?
Higher.
compared? It's higher, okay.
You
Thank
get
you.
what you pay for.
That wasn't yes or no, was it? But anyway.
No.
Sorry.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead, thank you.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk. Mr. Carey. Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll go on to the superintendent report.
Yep, this week, Thursday night, we have our CAC meeting. The topics we're going to cover, summer school. We'll look at summer school programming, try to get some feedback. Course books, as Mr. Raleigh already talked about, we'll talk about the high school and middle school course books. Also, at the September meeting, some feedback from CAC members, trying to get some information on Chromebooks, Canvas, how can parents find out more about it so they know what their students are doing. So Mr. Wolf will join us, and we're asking for CAC members to forward questions in advance so that way Mr. Wolf and his staff can use time to answer those questions at the meeting. So that's Thursday night. Also on Thursday and Friday of this week, for the first time in conjunction with the KEA, we're attending Turn Conference. which is collaborative association and teacher associations and administration. We've discussed it in the past, but this year's topic was relevant with our new contract with SEL. So there'll be 4 administrators, 4 KEA members attending together on Thursday and Friday to learn more about SEL as we start to talk more about a SEL period or SEL time that we're going to have kind of germane and appropriate at that time, so it's worked out well as far as timing. Last week, we had our foundation meeting, and President Sparber attended, and a couple of the outcomes. Number one, we do have another fundraiser that you'll learn more about tomorrow. Dr. Fuchs and I are meeting with Ms. Hodak tomorrow to start getting the word out. But on December 3rd, it's the annual Day of Giving that you've maybe seen bigger and more popularized with bigger fundraising entities. But as we learn more about it, we discovered it and we discussed it, and so Kaneland will be taking part in the Day of Giving on December 3rd, and more information will follow. So if you have questions on that, once you get the in the KCN, or when you get any tweets, text message, if you have questions, let me know. The municipal officials meeting that we had scheduled for October on the 30th. We couldn't, as I shared, we didn't have enough attendees, so we canceled and changed that meeting to Friday, December 13th. So Friday the 13th, probably kind of a scary date to meet on, but that's when we're going to meet. And then 2 other items quickly. Number 1, if you recall, our next meeting is on the 25th. We do have a slight change in the schedule, the way we're going to operate. We do have a 6:30 start. So we'll start in here at 6:30, and then we're going to move immediately to closed session. And when we go to executive session, we're going to go across the hallway into the science classroom and have our executive session there, so that board attendees that typically show up at 6:50 or 7 o'clock, they can come in here and then wait for us. We may be done by 7 and be back before when they would be attending, or if it does take a little longer, we will have staff members in here to let them know that we're in closed session, and we will resume open session when we come back. And then lastly, in the weekly update, I talked about Pay It Forward, and I've not confirmed yet a volunteer for that. So we have about...
We got a volunteer.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
All right.
Not tonight, right?
No, not tonight, but
So I do the homework.
close to tonight, but not tonight, but close to. So
What lady are you going to be on?
we'll talk right after the meeting, and we will nail down what we need, when we need it, and because the board member will be the next one. So thank you, Mr. Lawler.
Make 'em sign.
Sure thing.
Yep, thank you. That was all I had, so thank you.
Yep, I just wanted to remind you, if you have questions about the audit, please send them to Dr. Layden or myself. Secondly, if you don't want the hard copies, I'll take them back. We can use them. Various people ask for copies, and so it's nice to have extras on hand. You did get the electronic copy in the board packet. And then I think that's everything. Thank you.
Okay. Anything from the board members? Topics for future agenda?
That's the one I mentioned way back when, my graduation rates.
Oh, I'm like way back when, another meeting? No, he meant still tonight.
Hours ago?
Is that a Friday update, or is that a yay, nay?
His discretion.
It'll be a weekly update. We'll get that.
Okay.
The definition is in there, and we'll get more information.
I got a question. Do we ever look at our vendors and uniquely the vendor that takes our senior pictures? Or maybe even just the pictures altogether, but I know uniquely the senior pictures. And where I'm going with that is that something we ever explore of RFP in it? Or is it like that's what everybody uses, so we don't have a choice, so they...
Are you talking about school pictures?
Yes,
Yeah.
school pictures, senior pictures,
Okay.
uniquely.
The high school picks their own, and with the elementaries, we work together to decide who it is. We don't pay them, so we don't have
Well, I
to,
realize they don't pay them, because they charge like crazy.
for the parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we are looking, with the elementary principals, we're looking for a new one for next year. But I know, the high school, they and the middle school pick their own.
Okay. Do they negotiate it?
Yes, because they get, various things from them.
Oh, kickbacks, okay, I get it.
Seemed there were a lot of social media complaints this year.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't paying attention to grade level.
In reference to pictures and
Yeah,
prizes?
some kids came out looking sunburned, and some people didn't get everything they asked for in the package.
We're working on it.
Okay.
Yep.
I knew
Definitely
nothing about
aware
that.
of it.
I knew nothing about that, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
We're definitely aware and working on it. It's on our agenda for January to bring in vendors and explore.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any other topics? Public comment. I know, I'm like, wait.
Stuck out the whole meeting. I can't.
Right there with you.
Do I need to state my name and everything
No,
again?
no.
Okay. So I just wanted to comment about I have two things. The French, or the second foreign language. I think at a time when I agree we should maybe be looking at 3. But as a parent, if I had an 8th grader this year, I would be very leery about having them start French next year, knowing that they're taking a risk that they could not take a 3rd year. The jump from 2nd year to 3rd year is scary for some students. It gets a lot harder. I don't know what the percentage is between the number of students from Spanish that are from Spanish 2 that stay and go to Spanish 3, as we talked about from French 2 to French 3. But I'm concerned about the numbers for next year. Those 12 that are in French 3, you might see a decrease of those kids in the first year, this coming year or 2. So now we have fewer numbers. If that same restriction is going to be on, that we have to have a certain number to run the class. And then are we looking at only going to 1 language? That's concerning, really. Second thing is the decline in reading achievement at the elementary school. I challenge you to look at maybe a correlation to the elimination of certified school librarians.
Any other public comment?
Again, in light of the fact that it's a very long meeting, I just wanted to so again, Brad Connectus, I'm the president of the Sugar Grove Public Library District. As of this past April, I'm new. I moved to Montgomery in 2017. My purpose for coming here was to learn what your board cares about and what's on your minds, because as another tax-supported entity that kind of show up on everybody's tax bill, when I think of my strategic plan, I want to know what's on your minds, so that I'm not competing with it, that I'm acting in collaboration with it. So that's my point for being here. I extend my hands to everybody on the board here to come to a library district meeting. We meet on the 4th Wednesday of each month. Our next one is November 20th. And of course, we're going to be looking at our calendar for 2020. Would encourage you to come and do the same thing and reciprocate. But thank you so much for educating me on what your priorities are.
Brad, can I please get the spelling on your last name?
Absolutely. It's hard to spell, and it is German, and that's been a big topic tonight. But it is Knechtges.
You didn't guess that?
That's how I would have spelled it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, any other public comments? None? All right, we do have executive session tonight. So no action is expected to be taken after closed session, therefore the vote to go into executive session, the reporting will be concluded at that time. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer in the public body, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh, if we're going into executive
Oh, we have to
session,
roll call, I know, you
Roll
were
call,
calling me on
yep.
that, yes, I'm sorry,
Come
take
on.
you back.
Come on,
You
Mr.
have
Frank.
to, you have to do it.
Send this down.
I was ready for the last one. Were you gonna do roll call? No, I'm sorry, can you do roll call? I'm sorry.
You have to go into closed
Yes,
session,
I'm
Beth.
sorry, I was daydreaming that we were at the very end.
Okay, Mrs. Junk. Mr. Carey. Mr. Lawler. Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Beth.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
I know, sorry about that.
I'll catch you in a minute.